The happy life of a fun seeker in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 Poor Coulson. Tony briefly explained the situation to Captain, the Centenarian, and Sherlock, the magic-savvy player, before quickly flying off down the corridor. The remaining two men weren't idle either. Captain, after Tony's departure, beckoned Sherlock to continue on. After all, they still had to repair the hole caused by the Hulk. Even as Sherlock was repairing the hole, which looked like it had been made by a dump truck, the sea surface could already be seen, and the two were running out of time. Captain, unsure whether he'd understood Tony's explanation and was afraid of Sherlock's questions, or simply didn't know what was going on, said nothing. He raced towards their destination, picking off brainwashed agents along the way. Sherlock, naturally, was happy to have some free time, following behind Captain, occasionally offering magical support. But there was something Sherlock couldn't quite wrap his head around. Damn it! He'd already messed up the plot so badly, and Thor had still fallen for Loki's trick. A player who could knock Master Yi's possessed green fat man away was so easily fooled by Loki? So, is he really all brawn and nothing else? Or was Thor's fight with the green fat man not as easy as Sherlock imagined, and had Thor been beaten to a pulp? Sherlock's face beneath the mask twisted more and more as he thought about it. He even imagined Thor, with a greasy smile on his face, leaning against a tombstone he hadn't been able to make a scene with, proudly looking up at Sherlock. So, I'm awesome, right? I can knock the green fat man away. Aren't you jealous? I got it from my IQ? The more Sherlock thought about it, the more it seemed plausible. He wondered if Odin had forgotten to tick the IQ box when he was giving Thor points. Luckily, Sherlock's imaginary captain didn't know and quickly led Sherlock to the bottom of the ship. Sherlock, looking at the sea level so close, temporarily gave up his mental disdain for Thor and focused on recovering. Under Sherlock's magic, the large hole in the ship, blasted by the Hulk, slowly began to mend, finally completing its repair before it hit the water. After a violent tremor, Sherlock breathed a sigh of relief as the helicarrier's hull gradually stabilized. At least he didn't have to go through the same Titanic scenario again. Meanwhile, he internally despised the lighthouse's manufacturing capabilities. Damn, a helicarrier as fragile as a piece of slab. Damn, someone who didn't know would think they were reluctant to use steel. Seeing the situation come to an end, both Sherlock and the captain breathed a sigh of relief. Before either could speak, Tony's voice rang out over their communication devices. Captain, Wizard, where are you? I'm sending you a location. You'd better come over, especially Wizard. You must come. At Tony's words, Sherlock and the captain exchanged a glance. Without hesitation, Sherlock grabbed the captain's arm and disapparated. The next second, the two appeared in the glass prison holding Loki. The captain, caught off guard by Sherlock's sudden attack, collapsed forward, kneeling on the ground and retching. Sherlock ignored the captain's concern and began to survey the room. After all, retching gets old after a while. Sherlock had been there before. It wouldn't have mattered if he hadn't looked, but once he did, even the experienced Sherlock was stunned. A figure leaned against the corner of the room. From the looks of it, it looked like the unfortunate Coulson. Unlike in the movie, Coulson wasn't dead, but he was seriously injured. But what was more puzzling was that, while Coulson wasn't dead, he was covered in mushrooms for some unknown reason. Yes, mushrooms really grow in corners. Not only were there mushrooms, but the variety was incredibly diverse. From the red and white spotted Mario mushrooms to a variety of rare edible and medicinal mushrooms, it was practically a mushroom encyclopedia. Even Sherlock, with his limited agricultural knowledge, could recognize quite a few, like matsutake and chicken legs. The most bizarre thing was the large, shiny mushroom waving in the wind on Coulson's forehead. If Sherlock wasn't mistaken, it was a Ganoderma lucidum. Next to Coulson was a stretcher, flanked by two doctors and a nurse. Sherlock could actually see a mixture of fear, disbelief, resentment, and a well-concealed revulsion in their eyes. A medley of emotions contorted the three medical staff's faces. The Avengers weren't much better off. New characters Hawkeye and Black Widow pretended to be dead, and Tony didn't even open his visor. Even the experienced Nick Fury's mouth twitched, his remaining eyelid twitching wildly as he debated whether to try to save Coulson. Sherlock was the only one who fared relatively well. After all, Callson's condition was something Sherlock had never seen before. While he was used to seeing physical effects, this was the first time Sherlock had seen something so novel as Callson's property, Mushroom King. Effect: after loading this, various mushrooms will appear on your body at random. Perhaps you could try to find some edible ones? At least you won't starve to death while you're stranded in the wilderness. As for the taste? Honestly, everyone's curious. Time: 23 hours, 40 minutes, and 0 seconds. Sherlock watched as the three medical staff looked at Black Sauce Egg, standing in the front row, with pleading eyes, their gazes filled with a desire for life. Although the three medics didn't know what had happened, Black Egg, having tried Sherlock's potion, presumably knew what had happened. He also knew that Callson had half a bottle of the potion Sherlock had given him, and it was this half bottle that ensured Callson's survival. Therefore, under the desperate gazes of the three medics, Black Egg ruthlessly ordered them to treat the seriously injured Callson. Seeing the fierce glare in Black Egg's single eye, the three medics finally had no choice but to face death, with heroic expressions on their faces, as they prepared to lift Callson, who was leaning against the wall and growing mushrooms, onto a stretcher. Chapter 102, Riding the Sword. Under the pressure of Black Sauce Egg, the only thing the three medical staff felt safe in was their rubber gloves. Sherlock watched as the two men pulled two more pairs of medical gloves from their pockets and donned them. After a long, conflicted moment of gesturing, they gritted their teeth and steeled their resolve to move Callson, who was leaning against the wall. The tug was a minor error, perhaps due to Callson's movement or the two medical staff's carelessness. The large, glistening, Lindsay mushroom that had been resting on Callson's forehead suddenly fell off. This startled the three medical staff, but upon closer inspection, they were pleasantly surprised to discover that the mushrooms on Callson's body hadn't caused any harm, as if they had been glued to his body. With this surprising discovery, the medical staff's fears subsided. They slowly laid Callson flat on a stretcher and began to clean the mushrooms from his body. Sherlock clearly saw the nostalgic look on the face of the nurse standing nearby, her medicine box in hand, as she saw the Matsu take mushrooms. Sherlock even suspected that if they hadn't been taken from Callson, she might have tried to cook them and put them in her mouth to taste. However, to everyone's surprise, the two medical staff had just cleaned Callson of the mushrooms when, in full view of everyone, tiny mushrooms suddenly covered his body once again. In just a few breaths, poor Callson was back to his original position, leaning against the wall. One of the medical staff's eyes lit up at this scene, and they turned to stare intently at Braised Egg, standing nearby, their eyes filled with eagerness to try. Braised Egg's mouth twitched at the sight, and after a moment, he spoke helplessly to the medical staff. "Kaylina, I know your research requires some precious herbs, but please don't treat poor Callson like your herb farm. He's seriously injured. Please, you and Dr. Jack, help heal him. As for those mushrooms, herbs, I'd prefer you wait until Callson wakes up and get his consent before testing them. You know, they're his own, so they're like his children, right?" Black Egg cracked a rather tongue-in-cheek joke, but it was clear the pharmacist-turned-medic didn't get it. Instead, she nodded seriously and excitedly led Callson away. Black Egg opened his mouth, but nothing came of it. Seeing the fun was over, Sherlock lost interest, showing no interest in the conversation. He didn't even notice Thor, who had just returned, his face a riot of colors. Of course, taking pictures was a must. After all, this was Thor's rare past, and Thor wouldn't know about the helmet-mounted shots, would he? A fierce battle was about to begin, and Sherlock knew Tony would be the first to leave. He sent a message to Tony's helmet, telling him to let him know when he left, and then he turned his attention to the newly arrived Hawkeye. Hawkeye wasn't in great shape at the moment. He looked as if he hadn't slept in several nights, his eyes bloodshot. He rested next to Black Widow. Through his helmet, Sherlock kept observing Hawkeye's eyes and the various arrows behind him. Honestly, Sherlock was incredibly fascinated by Hawkeye's bizarre and powerful arrows. Having even watched Hawkeye's standalone series, Sherlock even thought Hawkeye must be a fun-loving person like himself, otherwise he wouldn't have such a wild imagination to come up with so many bizarre contraptions. If nothing else, that slime arrow alone was enough to confirm this for Sherlock. Aside from these bizarre fantasies, Sherlock was also curious about what kind of black technology Hawkeye's explosive arrows could use to blow up the helicarrier as if it had been hit by a dump truck. As if sensing Sherlock's gaze, Hawkeye turned and gave Sherlock a friendly smile. "Any questions, Mr. Wizard?" After all, Hawkeye had just learned from Black Widow the sinister nature of Sherlock's sorcerer alias, and the endless stream of outrageous actions. It would be a lie for Hawkeye to say he wasn't afraid. After all, even Black Widow had experienced what it was like to be a man, and Hawkeye was really afraid that he would also have to experience what it was like to be a woman. Feeling the kindness emanating from Hawkeye, Sherlock was a little uncomfortable for a moment, but curiosity soon took over, and in the end, Sherlock couldn't hold back and asked Hawkeye 3 questions about his character. "Can your eyes really spot a rabbit from miles away like an eagle? Do you make your own arrows? Where did you learn to use a bow and arrow?" Even Hawkeye, known for his polite manners, felt a sense of silence at Sherlock's inquisitive questions. After a moment's reflection, Hawkeye decided he didn't want to face the battlefield as a woman before the war, so he decided to answer Sherlock's questions honestly. But just as Hawkeye was about to speak, Tony, standing in front of him, shouted, "Fuck you, I know where Loki's going." Stark Tower, without caring about the others' reactions, he activated his suit and rushed out. Watching Tony leave the helicarrier, Sherlock briefly considered listening to Hawkeye's explanation, but it was clear there was no time. Black Egg's team was urging everyone to board the plane to support Tony. After apologizing to everyone and saying he needed to get ready and see him in New York, Sherlock apparated out of the helicarrier. Except Sherlock didn't appear at his New York home, but on Tony's back. It looked as if Sherlock was flying on a sword named Tony. "Fuck you, brat, what are you doing? I told you to add a flying device, but you refused, saying it was inelegant. And then again, can't your all-powerful magic even allow you to fly?" Tony, perfectly soaring in midair, stumbled under Sherlock's footsteps. He immediately connected to Sherlock's helmet and started cursing. As Tony spoke, Sherlock's mind unconsciously flashed back to an image of himself, a burly man, riding a small broomstick. Of course he could fly, but the image was too unpleasant to watch. Sherlock even suspected the small wooden stick would get stuck in his crotch. Sherlock swore he'd never let anyone see such a thing. As for flying magic, of course, it existed, but didn't it require mana? It was nowhere near as comfortable as Tony's current flight on a cosplay-like flying sword. So Sherlock naturally had a good reason for Tony's words. New York was too far away, and he couldn't apparate home directly, so he just wanted a ride. Despite Tony's rants, he couldn't do anything about Sherlock. In the end, the two sides agreed that Sherlock had to get off Tony's back before Tony entered New York City. Sherlock naturally agreed, but in fact, he was already very happy. He stood on Tony's back with his hands behind his back, very pretentiously, and with his loose robe, he looked like a real immortal. After all, Sherlock would never tell Tony that he had wanted to do this for a long time. Chapter 103 The War Begins. As it turned out, Sherlock was indeed trustworthy to a certain extent. Some distance from the city, Sherlock said hello to Tony and quickly left Tony's side. When Sherlock reappeared, he had returned to his room. Quickly gathering his equipment, Sherlock scurried downstairs. The Chitauri were a Zerg-like society, with a near-endless supply of Chitauri warriors. Sherlock hadn't forgotten the Avengers situation, which was suppressed by the enemy's firepower. Using magic alone wouldn't be enough to eliminate the growing number of Chitauri, even if Sherlock worked himself to death. It would be better to return and pick up some weapons, and then combine them with his magic, which would definitely yield unexpected results. Furthermore, even though his gun shop was some distance from the battlefield in downtown New York, Sherlock was still a little worried. After all, he only knew a few people. Sherlock didn't want anything to happen to those he knew. They quickly found Price and explained the purpose. Price, without further ado, led Sherlock to the warehouse. Sherlock didn't hesitate, and a vast array of weapons was quickly collected by Sherlock into his library. But when Sherlock explained the impending war and his hope that Price and his family would temporarily flee New York for safety, Price beamed with joy. Sherlock didn't even detect a hint of fear in Price's eyes, only eagerness. Seeing Price's excitement, Sherlock felt bad. He had forgotten that his uncles were ruthless killers. While others might be afraid of war, to them, it was like going home. Desperate, Sherlock found two little girls, hoping they could persuade his uncles. After all, little girls were still very lethal, and perhaps a little flirting would be enough to soften the hearts of those strong men. But Sherlock had forgotten one thing: his two little girls weren't ordinary people either. Despite Sherlock's clear explanations, Even exaggerating the dangers, they clearly showed no fear. Instead, they looked eager to try. Mindy even held her pink RPG, her expression as if to say, "When are we going? I can't wait to go on a killing spree against these aliens." Looking at the two clearly grotesque little girls before him, Sherlock felt his blood pressure rise to its highest level ever. For the first time in his life, Sherlock wanted to experience what it felt like to cast the Imperious Curse. Fortunately, Price ultimately made the final decision. Sherlock's firearm station was completely shut down, and all the trainees were immediately on combat duty, their guns loaded, ready to respond to any possible danger. Of course, Price and the others wouldn't stop them if they wanted to leave. Seeing his plans for his family to evacuate quickly dashed, Sherlock could only grit his teeth and silently resolve to keep the battle firmly within downtown New York. Quickly returning to his room and donning his suit once more, Sherlock apparated without hesitation, instantly returning to downtown New York. Downtown New York had become a battlefield ravaged by aliens. A portal in the sky had opened, and countless Chitauri began pouring out. Tony, now in his new suit, had already begun battling the incoming Chitauri. The remaining Avengers had just landed and were quickly engaged in battle, but perhaps without Coulson's death, the Avengers seemed to be fighting on their own. Sherlock even spotted the fallen Hulk. It seemed the effects of his syrup hadn't worn off yet. The Hulk still looked like Master Yi possessed him. The poor Chitauri had become a weapon in his hand. The screams of fleeing civilians filled the air. The usually bustling streets were reduced to rubble in a matter of seconds. People screamed and ran, trying to escape the battlefield. In a matter of seconds, downtown New York went from a bustling scene to veritable hell on earth. For the first time, Sherlock felt compelled to do something. At the very least, he couldn't let the Chitauri spread their carnage further. Acting immediately, Sherlock drew his wand, held his breath, and in the next second, a faint blue flame appeared on the tip of his wand. Fire shield, with Sherlock's spell, a massive, 100-meter-tall wall of blue flames instantly enveloped at least 10 city blocks. The intense flames radiated a heart-pounding heat, and countless Chitauri flying through the air were caught off guard and collided with the wall, turning to ash in the blink of an eye. Witnessing this scene, the refugees in the outer layers stopped in their tracks, staring at the raging flames before them with despair, unsure of what to do. The massive wall of fire instantly attracted the attention of the Avengers, and everyone's gaze was instantly focused on Sherlock. Although they knew Sherlock didn't want a battle to escalate, they couldn't bear to see the civilian captain, who hadn't yet escaped. "Wizard, you..." Before the captain could finish his words, Sherlock's voice, piercing through his helmet, resounded like a bell across the battlefield. "Attention, citizens of New York. The blue flames will not harm anyone, they will only stop the invaders. So, bring your loved ones and friends and bravely step into the flames. And tell those outside that there are still people here who need rescue. In this crisis, each of you will be a true hero." Sherlock repeated his words 3 times, ensuring everyone could hear. Initially, the fleeing civilians were skeptical. After all, anyone could feel the heat of the flames before them, a temperature that could instantly reduce a person to ash. But soon, under the pressure of the Chitauri, some finally gave in to their urge to survive. After all, a brave attempt was better than being killed by the aliens behind them. As the first person safely passed through the flames and returned to retrieve his wife and daughter, the crowd erupted in excitement, rushing towards the flames. In their eyes, the dark blue flames no longer represented destruction, but rather the hope of life. The captain, watching this scene, felt a slight embarrassment. He seemed to have misunderstood something, lacking any knowledge of magic. Just as he was about to turn around and say something to this mysterious teammate, he witnessed something he would never forget. Surrounding Sherlock was a myriad of weapons, guns, bombs, grenades, and other personal weapons, like rings of stars orbiting around him, guarding him at the center. Combined with Sherlock's suit, with a wand in one hand and a pistol in the other, the captain could sense a collision of magic and technology. Seeing the captain staring blankly at him, Sherlock's mouth curved slightly beneath his helmet. With a stern look in his eyes, he addressed the captain, watching the Chitauri continue to pour out of the cave entrance. "Captain, are you ready for a fight?" The captain couldn't help but smile at Sherlock's slightly electronic voice. "Of course, I can keep fighting all day." Chapter 104 Avengers Assemble 1. Perhaps thanks to Sherlock's 100-meter-high wall of flames, the civilians stopped panicking and even began actively saving themselves, using the natural barrier Sherlock had created. Some armed individuals even used this natural barrier to weave back and forth, performing various American IAI-style combat moves. After emptying their magazines, they immediately retreated back into the flames, resulting in few casualties. Without the restraint of the civilians, the entire Avengers seemed a little relieved, but only slightly. After all, the gaping hole in the sky was like a chrysanthemum with a broken stomach, constantly spraying the Chitauri. While the Chitauri were not strong individually, their numbers were overwhelming. Gradually, with the exception of Sherlock, who managed to hold his own thanks to his constant barrage of fire, the remaining Avengers, even the Hulk, began to feel slightly overwhelmed. Almost everyone present was a seasoned warrior, and with the exception of the Hulk, almost everyone felt the pressure of numbers becoming increasingly severe. But just as everyone except Hulk had discovered the benefits of Sherlock's firepower, the Avengers began to unconsciously gravitate towards him. In less than 30 minutes, almost everyone, save Hulk, the high attack and high defense berserker, had gathered around Sherlock. Sherlock paid no mind to this, unleashing his firepower relentlessly. He even secretly cast the sequence magic he'd learned in Asgard at the muzzle of each gun. After Sherlock's modification, this magic could effectively lock the gun's position like a silencer. Sherlock had a clear definition of his role within the team: support. While he could charge into battle, he was still a support. After all, only a support could stand back and watch the fun unfold. Sherlock felt his definition was spot on. After forcing everyone together, the Chitauri attack slowed noticeably, seemingly deliberately, as if they were waiting for something. Sherlock's intuition proved correct. Moments later, Loki appeared before the Avengers in a flying vehicle that looked like a throne pulled by a horse. He immediately struck a victorious pose and launched into a barrage of childish, tsundere trash talk at the Avengers, making Sherlock practically dig his toes into a 3-bedroom apartment. He rambled on and on about Loki, which Sherlock could easily summarize as something like, "I'm of noble descent, a prince of Asgard, and will soon be the king of Earth." He even flirted with recruiting the Avengers, saying things like, "Surrender your weapons and I'll spare you," and that after he became king, he'd bestow titles like founding generals. Before the rest of the Avengers could respond, Thor, the brainy idiot, jumped in and angrily attacked Loki, his words echoing the same message: "You're dreaming." They were brothers, but their rhetoric was identical, brimming with childish aura. Sherlock's brows twitched as he listened to the two men's exchange. The 3-bedroom apartment beneath his feet was practically transforming into a mansion. Sherlock really wanted to step forward and tell them that ruling the Earth wasn't that difficult. All Loki had to do was stand up and shout that once he took over, everyone would have to work 8 hours a day, with only a 1-hour break at noon and 2 days off a week. They would only eat 3 meals a day, and only milk for breakfast. Furthermore, everyone would only get 20 days of annual leave per year, and salary increases would only occur every 6 months. This strict process would be enforced, and everyone would be required to comply. With this rhetoric, would the Chitauri be even needed? Even the most resentful workers would help Loki overturn the Earth and respectfully invite the great alien monarch to the throne. Even more exaggerated, if Loki were to follow the Geneva Conventions, many workers would burst into tears of joy, eager to join the Earth's traitors, hugging Loki's thighs and shouting "Long live." Calling on the Chitauri to attack Earth now was a desperate move, potentially even counterproductive. Of course, Sherlock's thoughts were unknown to anyone. He had no intention of sharing his textbook alien domination of Earth. He could only silently watch the two brothers exchange words. Now they were exposing each other's secrets, bringing out all sorts of awful things. Even as the two men were exposing each other's secrets, both the Chitauri and the Avengers gradually stopped, watching the exchange with a look of indignation. Just as Thor began to reveal that Loki had taken him to spy on a Valkyrie bathing when he was 8, Loki finally realized what was happening. The silence was too much. Seeing both the Chitauri and the Avengers looking at him and Thor with such utter astonishment, Loki felt a rare sense of shame. Ignoring Thor's continued rant, Loki steered his throne towards the summit of Stark Tower. Seeing Loki's indifference, Thor glared triumphantly at the Avengers around him with a look of triumph. The Avengers looked at him with strange eyes, but Thor remained perplexed, smiling at them all. "What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? I just won an argument with my brother." Everyone rolled their eyes at Thor's naive speech. The next second, the stagnant battlefield returned to normal, and the guns around Sherlock roared again. Grenades and explosives flew like artillery shells into the Chitauri surrounding them. After a burst of explosions, Sherlock struggled to clear a gap in the Chitauri's human wave. Seeing this opportunity was now or never, the captain skillfully took command of the team and began assigning tasks according to each person's strengths. Tony, you go to midair and make sure those aliens don't get out of the range of the flames. Thor, try to use your lightning to block the high altitude. If you have time, find a way to reduce the number of aliens entering through that gap and deal with those big fish flying in midair. Hawkeye, you go to high altitude for support and report the location. Pay attention to your own safety. Natasha, play to your strengths and find a way to get to the roof of Stark Tower and shut down that damn device. As for Hulk, the captain's eyes fell on the green fat man who was happily hitting two Chitauri's daggers in Wing Chun. The captain hesitated for a moment, his mouth twitching, and then he said helplessly, Hulk should just adapt to the situation. Chapter 105 Avengers Assemble 2. Sherlock naturally noticed Hulk's behavior. He saw the two Chitauri dancing with ferocious energy in his grasp. If one gave way, Hulk would randomly select another unfortunate creature to become his new weapon. Hulk using humans as weapons was fine, and Sherlock wouldn't say anything about hitting them, but wasn't it a bit excessive to use two unfortunate Chitauri to attack that shark-like warship? Fine, you hit them, but were you really hitting them with the frequency of Wing Chun and not some Taiko no Tatsujin? Sherlock felt that Hulk's boxing style, with the two unfortunate Chitauri in his grasp, didn't resemble Wing Chun at all, but more like a Taiko no Tatsujin simulator on full blast. No wonder the captain's mouth twitched, and he called out Hulk's improvisation. Hulk's behavior alone made Sherlock feel that no one would dare approach Hulk and give him orders, lest they become the next drumstick. Sherlock, preoccupied with the green fat man, stood there waiting for a long time, unaware of the captain's instructions. He watched as the captain, shield raised, prepared to charge and take out the Chitauri on the ground. Sherlock finally stopped the captain, looking at him with a hint of disapproval. Captain, what about me? What about my mission? Hearing Sherlock's seemingly expectant tone, the captain felt his blood pressure rise a bit. As a centenarian with a scientific background, the captain knew nothing about magic. It's no exaggeration to say that before seeing Sherlock's disguise, the captain had always believed that magic existed only in novels and movies. Now, giving a mission to a real-life magician was a bit of a stretch for a centenarian. Besides knowing Sherlock could repair damage, the captain had no idea what else Sherlock could do. After a long hesitation, the captain finally looked at Sherlock and said, You and I will take out the enemies on the ground, and support the others. Then, as if reflecting on something, he asked again, Can you help? Hearing the captain's somewhat uncertain tone, Sherlock's face beneath his mask was filled with disbelief. What can you do it mean? Wasn't that a blatant lack of trust in him? Take that away. Isn't this something you can do? Sherlock grumbled to the captain with an exasperated eye roll. Seeing Sherlock agree, the captain breathed a sigh of relief. After everyone learned their missions, they quickly sprang into action. Hawkeye, hitching a ride with Tony, quickly reached atop a building and began to point out locations and act as an observer. Tony and Thor didn't hesitate, flying through the air, unleashing firepower to bring any Chitauri attempting to break free from their fire shields down to the ground or into the flames. Thor continuously summoned lightning, attacking nearby Chitauri craft with his hammer while simultaneously blocking the Chitauri entrance at the top of Stark Tower. While the effect was limited, it still managed to stop a number of incoming enemies. As for Black Widow, she was unceremonious. She snatched two firearms from Sherlock and, facing a look Sherlock had practiced for 2.5 years, she and Captain coordinated a flight onto Chitauri aircraft and vanished from the ground. Seeing that she and Captain were alone on the ground, surrounded by countless Chitauri, Sherlock didn't hold back. In a flash, all the firepower from her weapons was unleashed, and Sherlock quickly stored it away in the library. Seeing Sherlock's astonishing firepower retreat, Captain, who was currently battling the Chitauri, was still a bit confused, seemingly bewildered by Sherlock's intentions. The next second, with Sherlock's cry of Pestis Incendium, a massive, bright yellow flaming serpent flew from Sherlock's wand. The fire snake grew in the wind, soon transforming into a massive flaming serpent that filled the entire street. Sherlock waved his wand, and within a matter of moments, the ground began to crackle. Countless pieces of rubble flew like scales onto the fiery serpent, burning red in the flames. Devour! Sherlock waved his wand, commanding the serpent. The serpent, composed of fire and stone, roared and slithered down the street, opening its maw and devouring. Countless Chitauri screamed as the serpent thrust them into its maw, turning them to ash. Countless Chitauri witnessed this and tried to resist, but the serpent's hard, scorching stone scales gave them no chance. Even if they managed to escape the snake's maw, the red-hot stone scales were enough to give the ground troops a taste of what it's like to fry meat on a stone slab. The captain, not far from Sherlock, watched in amazement as his century-long scientific understanding began to crumble. At that moment, he finally had a simplistic, if fragmented, understanding of Sherlock's magic. The giant snake continued to slither across the 10-block area, leaving scars everywhere it passed. Any flammable material became nutrients for the snake, fueling its continued growth. Fortunately, there were no teammates on the ground. Realizing he wasn't needed on the ground, the green fat man leaped into the air, grabbing his two unfortunate weapons, and began working with Thor to clear out the flying fish. However, their teamwork was difficult to describe. While the green fat man and Thor performed powerful combos, he always tried to strike Thor after taking down a large fish. Thor tolerated it once or twice, but the constant attacks were unbearable. Finally, Thor, refusing to share the same fish with the green fat man, decided to avoid him. Seeing that his little revenge seemed to have been discovered by Thor, Hulk felt that it was pointless and started jumping towards the direction of Stark Tower. Although he was not very smart, he could see that the man who looked like the leader had just run into that tall building. Hulk thought that since his subordinates were so weak, the leader should be a little stronger than his subordinates. With this idea in mind, Hulk quickly jumped to the top floor of Stark Tower. Tony, who was flying in the air, also noticed this and distracted his attention to the top floor of his own building. But what Tony never expected was that this distraction made him see a famous scene, Loki's windmill. Chapter 106 Avengers Assemble 3. Watching Loki, seemingly a Chunyabao, being repeatedly slammed to the ground by the Hulk by his legs, and finally being called a weak god by the Hulk, Tony, perhaps because he'd been with Sherlock for so long, silently opened the video in his helmet and recorded the entire scene, even remembering to share it with Sherlock during a break in the fight. Sherlock couldn't help but laugh at the famous scene of Loki's windmill that Tony shared with him. Fortunately, the helmet blocked the view, so the captain and the others couldn't see what Sherlock was doing. While Sherlock was controlling the giant snake to clear the Chitauri on the ground and chatting with Tony inside the helmet about the famous scene Tony had just recorded, Black Widow was in a huge trouble. Despite her agility and constantly changing the Chitauri's flying vehicles, Black Widow didn't actually get very far. It seemed that the Chitauri had noticed her intentions and were deliberately surrounding her. In desperation, Black Widow could only plead for help on the public channel. After all, if this continued, everyone would be exhausted to death, even if they weren't killed by the Chitauri. Does anyone have a minute? I need a way to the roof of Stark Tower. It seems those damn aliens have discovered my intentions and won't even give me a chance to get close. Hearing Black Widow's plea for help on the public channel, Sherlock immediately put aside his slacking off with Tony and responded to Black Widow's request. Roger that. Please try to move closer to me. I'll clear a path for you to the roof of Stark Tower. Hearing Sherlock's distinctive electronic voice, Black Widow quickly controlled her flying vehicle to fly towards Sherlock's direction. Sherlock quickly spotted Black Widow's whereabouts with the help of his helmet lock. Quickly controlling his giant snake to move closer to him, Sherlock transformed into black mist and instantly flew into the air. The moment the flaming serpent reached Sherlock's feet, it disintegrated into pure flames. With a movement of Sherlock's wand, it soared into the air and began swirling around Sherlock and Black Widow. The flames around them grew larger and larger, and any Chitauri touched by them fell like dumplings. Even the flames, fueled by the increasing volume of fuel, gradually took on the shape of animals. Vulcan, clear the way. Sherlock knew the time was almost up. With a cry of magic, a broad path of flames instantly appeared before Sherlock and Black Widow. Seeing Sherlock clear the way for her, Black Widow didn't hesitate. Braving the intense heat, she piloted her aircraft swiftly towards the roof of Stark Tower. As Black Widow departed, Sherlock looked at the Chitauri swarming like locusts in the sky. He held back no longer, unleashing powerful magic from his wand like it was free. Exploding spells, crushing spells, even weather spells that could alter the weather and summon thunder, Sherlock unleashed a barrage of blows like a soaring turret. As Sherlock unleashed his full force, the pressure on everyone began to ease, and almost everyone instinctively gathered towards the Stark Tower to prevent further attacks. Black Widow, a true master of intelligence, announced in a brief moment on the public channel that she could shut down the teleportation channel. Everyone was unanimously delighted by this news, and began urging Black Widow to execute it quickly. Meanwhile, Black Egg was in a tough spot. Despite the Avengers' desperate battle in the heart of New York City, and even Sherlock's magical efforts to contain the fighting to a manageable scale, the World Council, acting like a beacon, still ignored the order to launch a nuclear missile. The order even bypassed Black Egg and went directly to the pilots in the helicarrier. Already upset over the downing of his own warship, Black Egg immediately began sending telegrams upon hearing the news. After failing to stop it, he even took up his RPG and attempted to destroy the plane carrying the nuclear bomb. Unfortunately, Black Egg's maneuverability was not only well known to Sherlock, but also to the World Council and the Hydra leaders within it. They gave Black Egg no chance at all, and another plane carrying the actual nuclear bomb took off right in front of Black Egg's face. With no other options, Black Egg could only contact the Avengers engaged in the battle. Everyone felt a chill upon hearing this news, and it also set the stage for the Avengers to escape SHIELD's control after the battle. Tony, however, didn't seem overly surprised upon hearing this news. As the former Lighthouse's largest arms magnate, he knew full well the nature of these fools in high positions. One could say he was cursed by knowledge. His mind was truly quick. He quickly decided to use his tactic to give the aliens a small shockwave from Earth. After explaining his plan to everyone, Tony quickly disengaged from the battlefield and flew towards the nuclear bomb. Sherlock took over Tony's position on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Black Widow, armed with Loki's wand, prepared to shut down the portal at Tony's command. Then, just as the original plot unfolded, Tony flew into the portal carrying the nuclear bomb. Sherlock even tried to revive Tony with a shot, but he was unable to do so. Tony then fell unconscious when his chest micro-reactor ran out of power. He was eventually rescued mid-air by the Hulk. Fortunately, Thor, a humanoid power bank, was there. With the help of Thor's Meow Hammer, the arc reactor was recharged, bringing Tony back to consciousness. As for the Chitauri, they were completely paralyzed after losing the signal from the mothership. They stood there like idiots, completely stunned. This was a drawback of the Hive Society. Without the mothership's command, the remaining engineers were essentially idiots. What left Sherlock speechless was that Tony, for some reason, was just like in the movie. The moment he regained consciousness, he actually insisted on treating everyone to a barbecue. The difference was that the barbecue this time didn't seem to be the same place from the book. At least, Sherlock had never heard of that restaurant, and he had no idea where Tony had gotten the information. In short, the battle ended anticlimactically, at least to Sherlock. Logically, with no hope of returning to their home planet, shouldn't the remaining forces fight back desperately, only to be captured and studied? Instead, the larger ones crashed to the ground as if their power had run out, and the smaller ones, even more dramatically, simply vanished on the spot, becoming dazed and dumbfounded. Sherlock had been tempted to complain about this in the movie, but now, after experiencing it in person, he felt incredibly uncomfortable holding back his complaints. Aside from Sherlock's nagging complaint, thanks to Sherlock's magic, the damage to New York City was significantly less than in the movie. 10 blocks of houses could be restored to their original state with a bit of repair, and with Sherlock around, it wasn't a problem. But whether it was barbecue or battlefield repairs, there was one more thing to do beforehand: give the unconscious Loki a little Avengers-inspired surprise. When Sherlock brought up the idea, the most excited person was actually Loki's good brother, Thor. This was quite amusing. The Avengers, all in their playful ways, were already thinking about how to impress Loki so much that he'd never want to return to Earth again, even after his death. Chapter 107, Loki Loses His Spot, Part 1. As a seasoned fun-loving person, Sherlock naturally wouldn't refuse such an opportunity and actively participated. Under Sherlock's leadership, the Avengers began brainstorming, and various ideas emerged like mushrooms after a rain. Ultimately, Sherlock, with his years of experience in finding fun, ultimately came out on top, relying on his extensive experience. Then, after experiencing the Hulk's windmill, Loki, dazed, felt a bright light shining into his eyes. After struggling to open his eyes, Loki confirmed that it wasn't an illusion, but a real, bright light. Fortunately, a second later, a sturdy green arm reached out and removed the light from Loki's eyes. Drowsily, Loki looked up along the arm and saw a large green figure standing near his head. The figure was wearing an unusually tight-fitting uniform, with a wide-brimmed hat perched askew on top of his head. The word security was embroidered on the chest. Although the Hulk's outfit looked a bit comical, resembling Zhao Si in a security uniform, the intimidating presence of his muscle-bound uniform was far superior to Zhao Si's. Furthermore, the Hulk was wielding a skull crusher, the head of which was even larger than a nightstand. Combined with the Hulk's sinister smile, Loki, who had been dazed, suddenly came to his senses. Fortunately, the Hulk merely smiled grimly at Loki and didn't make any further moves, which reassured Loki. But the next moment, Loki was dismayed to discover that he couldn't move anything except his head, as if he were strapped to the bed. Instantly, a wave of panic began to creep in. He ignored the Hulk overhead and began to survey his surroundings. This glance wasn't a big deal. The realization of the logic of his surroundings only intensified his panic. Standing to Loki's left was none other than Sherlock. Though his cyberpunk-looking helmet remained, his attire had changed. Sherlock was now dressed in surgical scrubs, his hands raised to his chest, covered in creamy white rubber gloves, smeared with blood. But what infuriated Loki most was that the mask, which should have been black, was now replaced with an LED emoji smiley face. Most importantly, the mere sight of this emoji was enough to send Loki into a rage. With a touch of disdain, he glanced to the other side. Standing on his other side was someone Loki knew well, Hawkeye, the Avenger who had been controlled first. However, Hawkeye wasn't wearing his familiar attire. Instead, he wore the same scrubs as Sherlock, and even his stance was identical. The only difference was that he wasn't wearing Sherlock's helmet, but a more traditional mask and hat. The man standing next to Hawkeye was familiar to Loki. It was Tony, the man in the Iron Man suit whom Loki nicknamed Tin Can. However, Tony's suit was unlike anything Loki had ever seen before. Tony was clad in pure white armor, with a large red cross on its chest. The blue glow of the arc reactor was perfectly centered within the cross. However, it wasn't Tony's suit that unnerved Loki, but his posture. Tony reached out one hand toward the bed, and countless tubes seemed to emerge from the arm of the suit, leading to the bed. Loki could sense a slight sensation on his skin, but he couldn't identify it. Tony's other arm was raised horizontally near his chest. From a distance, Loki could see a screen on it, filled with incomprehensible data and graphs. Opposite Tony stood Black Widow, dressed in a nurse's uniform. She also looked like she had just finished surgery, complete with a hat and mask. The only difference between her and Sherlock and Hawkeye was that Black Widow was holding a tray, strategically positioned just high enough for Loki to see its contents. Two small, oval, milky white objects, stained with a hint of blood. However, that wasn't what alarmed Loki the most. The most alarming thing was the sudden appearance of two pimples on his chest, and the fact that his clothing wasn't what he'd expected, but rather a hospital gown. Looking past the pimples to his feet, Loki spotted two figures standing there, the captain and his silly brother. The captain's outfit was familiar to Loki, it was the same outfit he'd worn during their battles. He also held his iconic round shield in one hand. The only thing that frightened Loki was the captain's expression. It was hard to describe that expression, just looking at it gave him a complex feeling. Meanwhile, his naive brother, Thor, was leaning against his opponent's shoulder, his back to Loki, his shoulders shaking. It's common knowledge that without seeing or hearing someone's voice, it's impossible to tell whether they're laughing or crying simply by looking at their back. Given the situation, Loki assumed Thor was crying. As for why, he had no idea. Having just woken up, he had only a vague understanding of his situation. Just as Loki was puzzled, Sherlock, standing beside him, spoke first. "You're finally awake, Mr. Loki, or should I call you Ms. Loki? Congratulations. The surgery was a success. You're now a beautiful, sexy woman," Sherlock spoke, gesturing to the contents of Black Widow's tray. His tone was incredibly gentle, even the emojis on his helmet changing with Sherlock's words. But the content of Sherlock's words sent Loki reeling, giving him goosebumps. Holy crap, I just led an army to invade Earth and got knocked unconscious, and when I woke up, my frying pan had turned into a baking sheet? Where the hell is my pan handle? Where did my giant pan handle go? Give me back my pan handle. Chapter 108 Loki loses his pot, Part 2. Loki panicked, his panic evident, and he even began to struggle violently. Unfortunately, the restraints on his body prevented him from moving his head. He couldn't understand why. Even if he was a loser, and the invasion of Earth failed, shouldn't he have been imprisoned or sentenced? Even if he were treated as an alien for some experiment, Loki could understand. But what on earth was this all about? He didn't understand, but he was deeply shocked. He even began to wonder if this was how this unfortunate place, Earth, had always treated its losers. Such a punishment would be horrific even in the universe. Just as Loki struggled to confirm this was a lie, the Green Giant, who had been standing above him, gently tapped his skull with the skull crusher in his hand. Although the Green Giant didn't say a word, Loki remained obedient and didn't dare to struggle any further. After all, Loki could feel the gust of wind created by the skull crusher. He didn't dare bet on whether his head was harder or the hammer in Hulk's hand. Although he stopped struggling, Loki still couldn't believe that he had lost the pot handle. He stared at Sherlock, who stood beside him like his attending physician, and asked with his back teeth almost gritted. "You must be deceiving me, right? I am the god of mischief. I don't even care about your cheap pranks. I can't feel any pain. My voice hasn't changed at all. Give up. Your cheap behavior is completely disrespectful to Asgard." Listening to Loki's words, Sherlock didn't refute anything. Instead, he began to explain to Loki in a gentle tone. No, dear Mr. Loki. Oh no, Mom, I'm sorry to tell you, this isn't a prank, it's real. You're not feeling any pain because the anesthetic is still effective. As for the voice problem you mentioned, we have a solution. As long as you follow the doctor's instructions and inject estrogen regularly, your male characteristics will gradually change, and you'll eventually become a complete girl. By the way, recovery from surgery will take about a month. Of course, that's for Earthlings. As a prince of Asgard, oh, no, princess, I think you should recover faster. Also, be sure to pay attention to your diet after surgery. Avoid spicy and cold foods. But don't worry about that. I'll tell the warden where you're being held. Finally, on behalf of the women of Earth, I welcome you to the Women's Federation. Loki had no idea what estrogen was, but after listening to Sherlock's meticulous medical advice, he finally gave in and started cursing. Of course, as the most cunning being in all of Asgard, even though he believed Sherlock's words 80% of the time, a lingering 20% of doubt remained. And the root of Loki's suspicion lay with Thor. Loki simply couldn't believe that Thor, his brother and fellow Asgardian, would allow these foolish Earthlings to change their gender to female. Desperate for proof, Loki ignored his restraints and desperately looked up over the peaks of his chest at Thor, who was still hunched over his opponent's shoulder, and roared. Thor! You won't let these damned Earthlings touch me. Right. This is just a prank. No. Answer me. Hearing Loki's roar, Thor, leaning on the captain's shoulder and facing away from Loki, almost beaming, shuddered. The reason Thor had turned his back on Loki was that after learning of Sherlock's plan, he couldn't control his expression. So, after hearing Loki's question, Thor practically activated his brain, which he had barely used in his entire life. Thor dug out every last ounce of his intelligence from childhood. With his brilliant mind now dominant, Thor didn't even bother answering Loki's question. Instead, he howled. That wail, trembling with desolation, filled with regret, grievance, and fear. It was as if Thor had poured all his acting skills into this one performance. The other, with a touch of wit, patted Thor's back in comfort. Thor's howl, like a lost fish, completely shattered Loki's illusions. In an instant, Loki slumped to the bed, like a lost fish. What Loki didn't know was that Thor's wail, though incredibly mournful, was actually just a trembling sound from a howl that nearly broke out into laughter, only to catch himself in time. It was this unexpected moment that gave Loki the feeling that he'd misjudged his brother, and he completely bought into Sherlock's prank. Little did he know that at that moment, while those wearing masks appeared normal, their mouths were clenched to their ears, their lips bitten purple to prevent laughter. Captain America, unmasked, even pinched his thighs with the help of his shield, recounting all the sorrows of his life to prevent himself from laughing. Hulk, taking advantage of Loki's inattention, found a corner and burst into laughter. He was just a little clumsy, not stupid at all. This was the funniest scene he'd ever witnessed, and he didn't want to ruin his carefully planned prank. In comparison, Sherlock and Tony fared much better. Sherlock, shielded by his helmet, was already laughing uncontrollably from within. Tony, however, was even more outrageous. After ordering Jarvis to lock his suit in its current position, he burst into laughter from within, barely concealing it, practically from beginning to end. Loki, unaware of their ill intentions, calmed himself for a few seconds before finally breaking down. No, according to the New York County Annals, after the battle, the Avengers gathered on the rooftop of Stark Tower, engaged in an unknown process. Within half an hour, the screams of Loki, the mastermind of the conflict, echoed throughout New York County. The sound was so piercing and sharp that it was almost beyond human power. Almost half of New York County heard Loki's agonizing scream. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 After the War. Seeing that Loki seemed to have already bought into the prank he and the entire Avengers had pulled off, Sherlock hesitated no longer. After all, delay would only lead to unexpected consequences. With a flick of his wrist, a syringe appeared in Sherlock's hand, and without hesitation, he plunged it directly into Loki's arm. Loki, doubting his fate, suddenly felt a sharp pain in his arm. He looked down with a look of fear in his eyes, and immediately saw Sherlock's syringe. Seeing Loki staring at him in horror, Sherlock, still wearing a cute emoji, continued gently. Don't worry, this is the first dose of estrogen. It's a slightly higher dose to help you recover from the surgery. I'll give the rest of the dosage to your brother and the staff who are holding you. Now, get some sleep. After all, the surgery is just over. Greek letter Omega. As Sherlock finished speaking, before Loki could react, Hawkeye, standing on his other side, thrust the syringe into his other arm. As Hawkeye moved, Loki felt as if his eyelids were weighed down by 1,000 pounds, and he instantly lost consciousness as his eyes closed. As Loki passed out, laughter erupted in the room, and everyone clutched their stomachs in laughter. As for the exact nature of the two injections, Sherlock claimed they contained no hormones or anesthetics, they were simply 2 injections of saline solution. Loki's unconsciousness was the result of Sherlock taking advantage of Hawkeye's distraction and casting a stunning spell on him with his wand. Even Loki's current clothing, along with the others, and the changes to his body, were improvised creations by Sherlock using transfiguration. Of course, to ensure the effect was more effective and less easily exposed, Sherlock put considerable effort into Loki's transfiguration. After all, it was a human form of transfiguration, and Sherlock even increased the magic power to ensure Loki remained a female until his return to Asgard. If only it had happened a little sooner, Odin and Frigga would have been surprised to discover their beloved son had turned into a girl after Loki returned to Asgard. The laughter was over, and the prank was a success. Sherlock waved his wand, transforming everyone back to their original forms. The Hulk looked with regret at the skull crusher in his hand, which had transformed into an ordinary road sign. He felt a pity, as he had quite liked the weapon. After handing Loki over to the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who had rushed over to investigate the situation and had a strange look on their faces, Tony still couldn't forget to treat everyone to a barbecue. Based on the camaraderie of having shared guns and pranks, almost everyone agreed to Tony's idea of a meal. After all, everyone was hungry after the battle. However, after arriving at the restaurant Tony had mentioned and tasting the barbecue, everyone's expressions were indescribable. Sherlock, in particular, didn't even touch anything. He folded his arms, mask on, and watched as everyone mechanically stuffed their food into their mouths with solemn expressions. The reason was simple, this barbecue place was owned by an Indian. Indian food is known for its cleanliness and hygiene. While the New York location wasn't as clean and hygienic as the local one, the sheer quality of the food was undeniable. Even Tony had a constipated look on his face as he shoveled food into his mouth. He had already made up his mind, once this was over, he'd fire the Indian engineer who recommended this barbecue place. After enjoying a meal of gooey, flavorful barbecue, everyone returned to Stark Tower. After all, the war was over, but there were still many things to deal with. Besides the wrangling over Loki's punishment, there was also the issue of repairs and compensation for the New York neighborhoods. Sherlock was directly drafted into Tony's service. Although he was initially reluctant, he eventually lost himself in the cheers of the crowd. Thanks to this incident, Sherlock's popularity among the Avengers skyrocketed. After all, who could resist an Avenger who could fight, heal, and repair? Of course, aside from this minor incident, the most crucial point is that the Avengers, led by Cap and Tony, have completely severed all ties with SHIELD, even with the politicians. The only people who can command the Avengers are the Avengers themselves. After all, no one wants to be fighting in the front line and then have a teammate drop a nuclear bomb on them from behind. Just once is enough. However, considering Black Egg's contribution to the formation of the Avengers, Tony and Cap are willing to exchange information with him, but it's only a matter of information exchange. Black Egg has no power over the Avengers. After over a week of wrangling among the various factions, the final outcome was finally determined. Even the right to imprison Loki would not fall to those individuals. He would be taken to Asgard, and even the Tesseract would be taken by Thor. The only responsibility left for SHIELD and the politicians is the disposal of the Chitauri debris, but according to the politicians' unfortunate concerns, this will, like in the movies, be outsourced to a private company. With everything completed, the first assembled Avengers parted ways. Hawkeye wanted to go home to see his wife and children, while Black Widow drove a convertible sports car for a vacation. Tony planned to go back to see Pepper Potts, and Captain America also planned to find a place to relax and unwind. As for Thor, he dragged the still untransformed Loki and the Tesseract back to Asgard via the Rainbow Bridge in front of everyone. Thor couldn't wait to see his parents' expressions upon seeing their beloved son transformed into a young woman. Of course, there was a small hiccup. Before leaving, Loki glared at Sherlock with an angry glare, as if he wanted to kill him with his gaze. Sherlock, of course, didn't hold back. Upon noticing Loki's gaze, Sherlock's helmet lit up with an emoji, and made a cutting gesture in front of Loki. Then, in an instant, Loki's eyes changed from anger and resentment to horror. It was truly PTSD. After seeing Sherlock's reaction, Loki even swore he would never appear before him again. It was truly terrifying. As for Sherlock, after bidding farewell to everyone, he naturally returned to his gun shop. After all, after not seeing them for so long, Sherlock missed his 5 uncles and the 2 little girls. However, what Sherlock hadn't expected was that upon returning home, he wasn't greeted by the 2 little girls running towards him, but a cold, deserted gun shop and training ground. After searching everywhere in confusion and finding no one, Sherlock found a letter on the coffee table in the upstairs living room. After reading the contents, Sherlock was completely devastated. The reason was simple: he, the Wizard of the Avengers, the sole provider of potions for SHIELD, the owner of the best training ground on the East Coast, Sherlock Phoenix, had been ruthlessly abandoned. Chapter 110: The Abandoned Sherlock. The letter Price left for Sherlock was actually quite simple, simply outlining the current situation. Due to the Battle of New York, all major factions were severely short on manpower, and as a result, many trainees had been called back. Furthermore, a small number of trainees also wanted to go home for the battle. Therefore, Price simply waved his hand and declared a month's break for the training ground. Of course, Price and the others wouldn't waste this month. Since Sherlock wasn't a very good boss and had never suggested taking them on team-building trips, Price waved his hand once again. Let's go. Abandon the boss and go team-building. Thus, 5 strong men, 2 little girls, and Sky, the receptionist, 8 people, set off in a mighty procession, not even calling Sherlock. Unbeknownst to Sherlock, the impact of the Battle of New York was far greater than he had anticipated. Not to mention, the battle had become a popular topic of conversation. Any faction with a bit of sense had set its sights on the Chitauri corpses left behind after the battle. After all, while they might be trash, they were still interstellar aliens. Just because the Avengers disdain something doesn't mean the government and JD disdain it. Even if something is disdained by these official powers, if it falls into the hands of ordinary people, some clever individuals could manipulate it to become a powerful force for some to dominate. Sherlock wasn't opposed to Price and his friends going on a team-building trip. After all, they were his uncles. He wasn't too concerned about the remaining 3 either. Strictly speaking, they were just extras. But when Price told Sherlock in a letter that even though the training camp was on hiatus, it didn't mean the gun shop was closed, and urged Sherlock to run it well, Sherlock was completely taken aback. So, you all go out and have fun, and you're asking me to come back to work, right? If this had happened to Sherlock, a corporate slave accustomed to being bossed around by his boss when he first traveled through time, he might have obeyed and run the shop properly. But now? Sherlock declared, I'm the boss. I don't care what you think, I care what I think. Open a shop, open a shit shop. What lazy people like most is when others are at work and I take a break, and when others take a break, I still take a break. After all, unless the company is a big deal, neither a worker nor a fun person would like to work when others are having a rest, right? As for whether Price would give Sherlock a good beating after he came back because he found out that Sherlock had not been obedient and skipped work, Sherlock himself said that he was not worried at all. Anyway, it's not the first time. It will be over if you grit your teeth and endure it. What's more, there is magic. As long as you don't die, you will definitely be able to save it. Then you will be fine if you grit your teeth. Sherlock, who had prepared himself mentally, threw away the letter in his hand. After watching the letter turn into ashes in midair, he clapped his hands with satisfaction. As long as I say that I have never seen the letter and have no proof, no one can deal with me. Thinking of this, Sherlock took out his car keys without any burden, happily ran to his car, jumped in the car, started the car and turned to leave without any burden. Go have some fun at your Uncle Tony's. 40 minutes later, Sherlock emerged from Tony's villa with a constipated expression, as if he'd witnessed something truly disturbing. The reason for Sherlock's reaction was simple. Tony, having weathered a major battle, seemingly made a heartfelt confession to Pepper Potts at the final nuclear bomb drop, just as in the original novel. Now, the two of them were getting stalemate. Damn it. Two people, nearly 100 years younger than each other, were like conjoined twins, forced to walk together everywhere. Could you handle that? Half an hour later, they arrived at Tony's villa, and after 10 minutes of being fed a mouthful of dog food, Sherlock declared himself exhausted. And these two weren't just feeding him dog food, somehow, they started urging Sherlock to get married. Their coordinated urging made Sherlock feel like he was back in his pre-time travel days, facing his aunts and uncles for Chinese New Year. It was truly unbearable. Consequently, Sherlock spent less than 10 minutes there before decisively fleeing, feeling he couldn't continue to shine. A fun-loving person is someone who enjoys having fun and watching the fun, not someone who enjoys being the fun. With a look of frustration on his face, Sherlock began to think about where else he could find some fun. Black Widow? Well, forget it. Not only did Black Widow vanish without a trace during her vacation, even Black Egg had trouble finding her. Even if Sherlock did find Black Widow, he wouldn't know how to approach her. After all, it was his pseudonym that made him familiar with Black Widow. Strictly speaking, Sherlock's true identity was just a supplier who had met Black Widow once. Hawkeye was even more out of the question. He had a wife and children, and even if he was in disguise, he wouldn't dare disturb them. Thor in Asgard was even more out of the question. He couldn't possibly go to White Egg, could he? Sherlock swore that if he went to the Ancient One for such a frivolous reason, not only would he not go to Asgard, he might even take him to face the Dark Dimension. Aren't you very free? Want to know about a trial card for the Supreme Sorcerer, who's on call, 24/7, year-round, with no pay and no social insurance or housing fund? Sherlock got goosebumps just thinking about it. He just wanted to have some fun on vacation, and he definitely didn't want to work illegally for Ancient One. Thinking it over, Sherlock realized the only person he could possibly have fun with was the captain. He knew him, whether in disguise or in person, and they had a pretty good relationship. Having made his decision, Sherlock picked up the phone, searched for the captain's private number, and called. After a few beeps, the captain's voice came through Sherlock's phone. Sherlock? What's up? The captain's calm tone filled Sherlock with joy. It was a familiar voice, after all. Without hesitation, he stated his purpose. Captain, where are you playing now? Take me with you? By the way, tell me about the New York War, Sherlock said to the captain on the phone in a mixed voice, pretending to be innocent and knowing nothing. Chapter 111 The Captain's Vacation Life, Part 1. The captain didn't hold back at Sherlock's question. He directly explained his location and warmly welcomed Sherlock. Sherlock almost burst out laughing when he learned the captain's location. Sherlock was familiar with the captain's current location, Florida. Well, it's that place known as the Bayou of America, where you can be broke, but you can't be broke. Sherlock immediately understood the captain's purpose there. He was definitely going for the beaches. Florida boasts arguably the longest coastline in the United States, with a prevalent beach culture, and its proximity to the equator. Besides the notion of being broke but still alive, mentioning Florida at the lighthouse immediately conjured up images of sunshine, beaches, and bikini-clad beauties. Seeing the captain agree to his team-up request, Sherlock didn't hesitate. He jumped into his pickup truck, started the engine, and sped south. After all, the captain didn't know he had a vest, so Sherlock decided it was best to keep a low profile. After nearly 3 days of driving, Sherlock managed to make it from New York to Florida. Of course, he'd cheated a bit, he still needed to sleep, so driving 24 hours wasn't an option. So, the next morning, Sherlock would find a deserted spot, open a portal, and travel a short distance, pretending he'd traveled 24 hours. When Sherlock reached the beach the captain had mentioned, he spotted the captain sunbathing on the sand. Excited at finally having a friend, Sherlock jumped out of the car and headed towards the captain. In just the short distance toward the captain, Sherlock saw 3 or 4 groups of women, excited yet shy, running up to the captain to say something. Then, at the captain's smile, their expressions turned regretful and apologetic, and they left with a look of disappointment. Yet, American hips and big bears aren't just for show. By the time Sherlock reached the captain, he couldn't contain his smile. "You're welcome, Captain." Upon hearing Sherlock's voice, the captain, sunbathing on the beach, happily removed his sunglasses and looked at Sherlock. "Sherlock, stop teasing me. I didn't expect you to arrive so soon." The captain, true to his name, exuded sincerity that Sherlock couldn't fault. He felt so at home that Sherlock almost hesitated to tease him. Of course, Sherlock's thoughts were unknown to the captain. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, the captain took Sherlock to his hotel, checked in a room, and then offered to treat him to dinner. Sherlock, of course, wouldn't refuse and drove off with the captain. Upon seeing Sherlock's car, the captain sincerely praised it, and Sherlock, unfazed, let the captain drive it for a spin. The saying that a man remains a young man until his death is truly true. Even though the captain was technically over 100 years old, he excitedly took the car keys from Sherlock. The two even made a detour to find a deserted stretch of beach to scrape at the sand. The captain, excited, then, with a look of vicissitudes, lamented the progress of the times. Sherlock was almost accustomed to this. After all, during his training with Sherlock, he'd heard the captain exclaim about the progress of the times more than once. After the two settled Sherlock's accommodations, the captain took her to a small restaurant, which, he declared, offered the best food in Florida. The captain, true to his name, was undoubtedly a favorite among Western girls, young and old. As they ate, Sherlock could already sense the girls' enthusiasm. No fewer than 7 or 8 of them approached him. The less timid ones simply wrote their contact information on slips of paper and asked the waiter to pass them to him. The bolder ones even sat next to the captain, pretending to have mistaken him for someone else. Some, more sophisticated, even told him where they lived. Fortunately, Sherlock was sitting across from the captain, a naturally kind-hearted man who politely declined all the advances from the girls. Later, some of them even started to make advances on Sherlock. After all, while Sherlock wasn't as popular a hunk as the captain, he was certainly no slouch either. The only reason he wasn't as wild and frenzied as the captain was simply because he looked younger. Sherlock expressed frustration, believing that magic could slow aging, so looking younger wasn't something he could control. Of course, as the captain's beloved friend and family member, Sherlock couldn't bear to see the captain suffer so much, losing his vacation to the constant stream of girls. So, after Sherlock's persuasive persuasion, the captain agreed to try Sherlock's potion that night. On their way back, the two of them found a random young man, about 17 or 18, secretly cut his hair, and ran back to the hotel. This was the first time the captain had ever engaged in such an exciting and shady act in his life, and besides the novelty, he felt a tinge of guilt. Sherlock, however, remained nonchalant. It was just a few strands of hair in the polyjuice potion, so he didn't take their actions too seriously. That evening, Sherlock handed the captain a bottle of polyjuice potion and frankly informed him of the side effects. But for the captain, simply enjoying his vacation was enough, no side effects mattered. So, the next morning, after Sherlock woke naturally, he couldn't reach the captain. After repeated confirmation, he confirmed that the captain hadn't left his room. Despite Sherlock's relentless knocks, the captain, embarrassed, reluctantly opened the door. However, even when the door opened, the captain wasn't the American-looking, perky-assed Captain Sherlock knew. Instead, she was a petite, adorable girl with a baby face, cat ears, paws, and a tail. Upon opening the door, Sherlock, upon seeing this adorable girl, almost couldn't help but exclaim, "Son, You're really playing fast and loose. He hadn't expected the captain to be this kind of captain. Fortunately, after Sherlock entered the room and explained repeatedly, Sherlock finally confirmed that this cute girl with cat ears, cat paws, a flexible long tail, and wearing a men's shirt was the captain. Chapter 112 The Captain's Vacation Life, Part 2. After confirming the captain was the adorable cat ear girl before him, Sherlock rolled over on the ground, clutching his belly in laughter. Even the good-tempered captain nearly struck Sherlock. The adorable cat paws even stretched out their claws in the captain's excitement. It must be said that Sherlock's potion was effective, but also not that effective. The captain's current appearance was definitely not going to attract any attention from the girls. While that wouldn't be enough, the idea of him attracting the perverted Fury Control captain was unacceptable. Even when Sherlock pulled out his phone to film the captain's past, Sherlock was rewarded with a meow punch from the captain. While petite and adorable, the captain's strength was undeniable, as evidenced by the paw marks all over Sherlock's body. Of course, Sherlock did some in-depth research to understand the captain's transformation. The fact that he had become a cute girl wasn't anyone else's fault. Sherlock and the captain had made a hair mistake. It looked like the boy's hair wasn't just his own, but also his sister's or girlfriend's. The captain's petite and adorable figure was likely due to this. After Sherlock explained the situation to the captain, even the experienced captain could only sigh at his brilliant idea. As for the captain's feline features, it was likely a side effect of Sherlock's potion. Who knows what it must have felt like for the captain to happily drink the polyjuice potion Sherlock had given him, excitedly preparing for a quiet day on vacation, only to discover he'd transformed into a woman, and so tiny. Sherlock could even picture the captain's flushed face examining himself, followed by a look of despair. Of course, Sherlock wouldn't miss out on such a treat. While the captain wasn't paying attention, he secretly took a few photos and sent them directly to Tony. Then Tony called the captain's phone, and Sherlock could hear the unbridled laughter from 1,000 miles away. The consequence, of course, was another meow punch from the captain. But it should not be said that the pink balls on the captain's paws are really cute. Even though he was beaten, Sherlock, as a cat slave, was strangely satisfied. Fortunately, the polyjuice potion was not effective for a very long time. In just one morning, the captain said goodbye to the red-faced body and became his original appearance. It's just that the appearance has changed, but it doesn't mean that the side effects will disappear. Then, a captain with cat ears, cat paws, and a long cat tail appeared in front of Sherlock. Sherlock swore that he definitely didn't mean to laugh, but the captain's appearance after returning to his true form would be worse than maintaining the appearance of a female body. The contrast was too strong. Seeing Sherlock once again holding up his cell phone to take pictures while holding his belly and rolling on the ground laughing, the captain said that he was really tired and had underestimated the power of the naughty kid. Similarly, the captain experienced the helplessness of the two Lolita living in Sherlock's house for the first time. This time, the captain didn't give Sherlock another meow-fisted stunt. Tired and disenchanted, he simply let it go. Whatever, it was only a day, so he could just relax in the hotel. He couldn't go out. A woman with cat ears and paws might be considered cute, but if the captain went out looking like that, he'd probably be on the front page of the news the next day. The captain didn't want his lifelong innocence to be ruined by rumors of being a furry addict. Thankfully, the captain was back to normal the next day. From then on, he never used Sherlock's potions unless necessary, and their vacation life was back on track. While life was back on track, Sherlock felt it was boring. In Sherlock's words, his 80-year-old grandfather before he traveled through time was much more active than the captain's. Take a look at the captain's vacation life. He woke up promptly at 8 in the morning, woke Sherlock up, and then they packed up and ran to the beach for a 1,000-meter swim as a morning exercise. At 9:30, they'd find a restaurant for breakfast, then return to the beach at 10 o'clock, beer and drinks in hand. The captain would usually head out to the sea for another 4 or 5 laps, then leisurely return to the beach to bask in the sun with a cold beer. Around midnight, he'd drag Sherlock to a specialty restaurant to try some international cuisine. Afterward, they'd return to the beach for another siesta, basking in the sun with a cold beer. Around 3 o'clock, they'd get up and swim a few more laps, then lay back down in the sun while dealing with the harassment of some girls. Around 7 o'clock, they'd take Sherlock to dinner at one of the captain's favorite restaurants, then head back to the hotel for a shower and end their vacation. Forget about the bar, the captain wouldn't even try fishing, Every day was pretty much the same. After just 3 days, Sherlock couldn't take it anymore. It felt like a life of stifling military training. He was on vacation, not training. No, military training was much more dynamic than this kind of life. At least there was some fun between sessions, instead of this rigid, time-bound routine. If things continued like this, Sherlock felt he might as well try out the Ancient One Sorcerer Supreme Experience package. The key was that the captain was incredibly satisfied with this vacation lifestyle, even describing it as a pure enjoyment. Sherlock said he couldn't handle such enjoyment, so on the 4th day, he said goodbye to the captain and drove back. The road was incredibly fast, Sherlock remarking that scraping sand in a deserted place was far more enjoyable than the captain's old age. Just as Sherlock was nearing New York after 2 days of running, he was speeding down a country road when a sudden explosion echoed from the sky. Before Sherlock could react, a flood of colorful lights and shadows suddenly appeared in front of him. Having seen the movies, Sherlock immediately realized what this thing was. Damn Rainbow Bridge. Damn Thor. Responding quickly, Sherlock swerved, dodging Thor's fall. Then, angrily, he exited the car and watched Thor, with a naive smile on his face, greet him with a bouquet of Asgardian flowers. Then, looking at the mysterious patterns on his beloved car, etched by the Bifrost, his mouth twitching, Sherlock decided to ignore the idiot running towards him. He climbed into the car with a blank expression, locked the doors, rolled down the windows, and ignored Thor, who was banging on the window from outside. Sherlock picked up the phone and dialed the insurance company. "Hello, it's me again. You might not believe this, but my car's paint has been chipped by an alien teleporter. I can claim it." Before Sherlock could finish his words, he heard the sound of glass shattering. Turning to look, Sherlock's blood pressure soared, and he continued through gritted teeth. "Oh, by the way, the passenger side window was also broken by those damn aliens. The address is XXXX. I'll be waiting here for you guys to come over." Chapter 113 Thor's Love Life, Part 1. To Sherlock's surprise, despite following the prescribed procedures to request a claim, the operator on the other end clearly had no such intentions. After Sherlock's flurry of words, the operator, in a polite yet sweet voice, asked Sherlock to write down a number and send photos of the damage to the number later. They would file the photos as soon as they received them, and the compensation would be made immediately after Sherlock's car was repaired. Sherlock was stunned by the little rhetoric. Damn it! Is this still the same insurance company from the notoriously difficult Lighthouse country? Has their personality changed? Why are they so easygoing today? The operator on the other end, looking at Sherlock's information on the screen and a bold, enlarged note highlighted in red, was speechless. "You're the nephew of a billionaire, and the thing is, this famous billionaire is also the CEO of his own company, and you're short on this little bit of money for repairs? Is this even necessary? Would you be embarrassed to leave your rich uncle like this? You might as well just ask your uncle for the insurance claim." The operator thought about it and recalled a scene from a DC comic she'd seen a few days ago. Superman stood at the gate of his recently seized farm, watching in amazement as the bank employees who had just boxed up his assets were putting them back in their original locations. Turning to Batman beside him, he asked, "How did you do that?" Batman calmly replied, "I bought a bank," except this time, Batman's face was Tony, while Superman was Sherlock, beaming on the screen. He thought, I think I've discovered something incredible. Uncle-nephew relationship. Sherlock had no idea the operator on the other end was already imagining some unspeakable, overbearing CEO story. She hung up the phone with a puzzled look on her face, emotionlessly snapping away like a heartless camera. Even the naive Thor, sitting in the passenger seat, snapping a few pictures. The scene, the murderer, and the victim's vehicle were all clearly photographed. Sherlock double-checked that nothing was missing before sending the photos to the insurance company. As for the insurance company's reaction to Sherlock's photos of the murderer, that was not Sherlock's concern. After finishing everything, Sherlock returned to the car with an expressionless face. He placed his hands on the steering wheel and took several deep breaths. He slowly regained his composure, a professional smile suddenly appearing on his face. He turned and opened his arms to Thor, who was standing beside him. "Oh, my dear Thor, it's been a long time since we last met. What brings you here?" Sherlock said, trying hard to control his expression. The reason was simple: Thor's outfit was too much for Sherlock to bear. He was wearing a pink suit and a white shirt. The style was very Asgardian, but the color was something Sherlock couldn't understand. However, this is not the most eye-catching thing. The most eye-catching thing is that on Thor's chest, for some unknown reason, there is an embroidered pattern that Sherlock is very familiar with. Yes, that's right, it's the Hello Kitty cat head with Thor's characteristics that was printed on the Meowth hammer when Sherlock made fun of Thor. By the way, where is Thor's Meowth hammer? Thor on the other side didn't feel anything strange about Sherlock at all, and even sat upright when he saw Sherlock looking at his clothes, as if he was very proud. Seeing Sherlock open his arms, Thor naturally hugged Sherlock enthusiastically, and then explained to Sherlock with an excited face. "Long time no see, buddy. Just to tell you, I ran away secretly. I wanted to come see Jane during the Battle of New York, but I was obviously busy dealing with my stupid brother back then. Now I finally have time to check on her. I wonder if she's doing okay. By the way, did you see how I looked during the Battle of New York? Wasn't I handsome?" I bet Jane saw it too. As Thor spoke, pink bubbles began to form around him. Sherlock's face twitched at his shy expression, and he almost couldn't keep his fake smile from coming back. Fortunately, Thor's reaction was as quick as it came. He quickly reacted and looked at Sherlock beside him with a serious face. "By the way, what do you think of my outfit? I had it made by an Asgardian tailor based on Earth clothes. Isn't it formal?" After hearing Thor's words, Sherlock wanted to curse, but out of his single-minded anger, he smiled and replied, "Well, it's quite formal, but it's still a little off. Get out and wait for me. I'll get something from the trunk." With that, without even considering Thor's reaction, he got out and pretended to search the back of the car, actually finding a bowler hat and a bottle of hair wax from his library. Sherlock even used magic to change the hat to a popular green color. After all, these clueless foreigners had no idea what a green hat meant. Sherlock was playing on the information gap. Thornag, clueless, had no idea what Sherlock's hat meant. He squatted down as Sherlock ordered, watching as Sherlock slicked his hair like a dog, then put the bowler hat on his head. Thor was quite beautiful. Honestly, such a vibrant look really suited Thor's taste. Seeing Thor looking at his new look with a look of satisfaction, Sherlock said nothing more. Suddenly, the anger he felt for Thor destroying his car once again dissipated. Only then did he look at Thor and ask what he had been meaning to ask. "Thor, where's your hammer?" Thor was currently admiring Sherlock's rearview mirror. Hearing Sherlock's question, he answered without turning. "I didn't bring it with me. I left it in Asgard for maintenance. You know, Mjolnir played a vital role in the Battle of New York, so of course it needs some post-battle maintenance. Besides, I came to Earth to meet Jane, so I don't need Mjolnir." Sherlock was surprised to hear Thor's words. Thor, who loved his hammer so much, now had something that could surpass his Meowth hammer. Well, saying thing wasn't quite the right word. After all, Jane was a living, breathing person, and a stunning beauty at that. Sherlock nodded with an extremely strange expression on his face before continuing. "Okay, for the sake of our friendship, Jane is there. I'll drive you there." Chapter 114 Thor's Love Life, Part 2. Upon hearing Sherlock's words, Thor naturally turned around and looked at Sherlock with a puzzled expression. "Of course, my friend, why else would I come to you? Of course, I don't know Jane's location and need your help." As Thor spoke, he reached into his crotch and quickly pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, which he handed to Sherlock. Sherlock almost couldn't contain himself at Thor's actions, his eyes filled with disdain, and he didn't want to take the paper Thor handed him. Not knowing Jane's location? Thor was undoubtedly a fool. Sherlock didn't believe that Heimdall, the ninth gatekeeper of Asgard, didn't know Jane's location. It was obvious that he died because he didn't want to tell Thor. But Thor obviously didn't see the disdain in Sherlock's eyes. He grabbed Sherlock's arm and directly placed the paper in Sherlock's hand. Sherlock's face was filled with shock. Although he despised Thor's note, he couldn't resist Thor's strength. He could only hold his nose and accept it. Using 2 fingers of his other hand, he carefully pinched a corner of the paper and slowly lifted it up. Using 2 fingers of his other hand, he slowly unfolded the paper. The note contained a simple phone number, which made Sherlock's eyelids flutter. "Damn it, if you want to call, just say so. I have Jane's phone number. Why make it so precious and mysterious, and in the end, it's just a phone number." Sherlock rolled his eyes and decisively released the paper from his fingernails. With a flick of his hand, He found a disinfectant wipe from the library and began to wipe his hands. Thor, however, was quick to snatch the paper before it fell to the ground, then rolled it up and stuffed it back into his crotch. The movement was so smooth that Sherlock's eyelids fluttered. Speaking of which, could you have kept Jane's number safe? Thor chuckled at Sherlock's complaint and began to explain mysteriously. Of course, that's Jane's number. I asked my mother to sew a small hole in my underwear specifically for Jane's number. Trust me, it won't get lost. Looking at Thor's naive expression, Sherlock was convinced. Damn, he was a hopeless idiot. How could someone as smart and gentle as Frigga have given birth to a fool like Thor? And most importantly, she could still pamper him like this, sew it up whenever she wanted? If Frigga got to know Sherlock's complaints, the usually elegant and gentle Frigga would probably snap, grab Sherlock by the collar, and yell, "Do you know the power of older naughty kids?" After scolding Thor with his face for a while, Sherlock finally sighed helplessly. After all, a fool like Thor couldn't understand the depth of Sherlock's insults. After playing a bit of single player, Sherlock finally sighed helplessly and picked up his phone to call Jane. After getting Jane's address, Sherlock beckoned Thor to get in the car. Thor's hesitation would have been unworthy of his nickname, Sahanhan. He decisively jumped in and left with Sherlock. Jane, who had resigned from SHIELD after Loki seized the Tesseract and triggered the Battle of New York, was resting in her hometown, a small town not far from them. Sherlock drove straight there with Thor. When they arrived, they saw Jane selling potted plants at the market. Well, an astrophysicist selling flowers from home, it was quite creative. Seeing a high-end Shelby Raptor Baja Edition pickup truck parked next to her stall, even though it showed a bit of battle damage, Jane knew its owner instantly. She knew only one person with an unparalleled passion for Raptors. Sherlock. Jane excitedly greeted Sherlock, who had just opened the car door. Before Sherlock could reply, Jane saw Thor stepping out of the passenger seat. Jane couldn't help but burst out laughing. After all, who could have imagined that Thor, a muscular man, would be wearing such a bizarre pink suit with a cute cat head embroidered on the chest? And most importantly, he was wearing a lush green hat. Jane instantly understood that this was Sherlock's prank on Thor. After all, when they were together, Sherlock and his best friend had often played tricks on the naive Thor. However, Jane was very sensible and didn't directly call Sherlock's prank out. Instead, she tried hard to suppress her laughter. Even the resentment she felt for Thor not visiting her for so long dissipated a lot because of the prank. Seeing the intense gaze between them, Sherlock couldn't bear it any longer. After dropping Thor off at his destination, Sherlock wanted to leave. But before he could leave, he had one thing he had to do: get his car fixed. After all, the Rainbow Bridge had imprinted a mysterious pattern all over his car. Most importantly, the tin plate had been exposed by the Rainbow Bridge. Sherlock, a car lover, wouldn't let his car sit on the road like that. If it rained and it got bad, the rust would rust through, which would be even more troublesome. He'd better find a repair shop in town to get it painted. After asking Jane where the repair shop was, Sherlock ignored Thor, who was standing next to Jane with a pink bubble in his eyes, and drove straight to the shop. But it was clear that Sherlock had no intention of leaving. The repairman told Sherlock that the repair would take a week. After all, there were several cars ahead of him that needed repairs, and repainting was a big job. The most important thing is that the owner of the repair shop is a stubborn person. Even if Sherlock wants to pay more to jump the queue, he won't let him. He insists that Sherlock queue up. In desperation, Sherlock can only return to Jane's stall cursing. After all, this is the only repair shop in the whole town that can spray paint, so Sherlock can only accept it with a pinch of his nose. Sol and Jane, on the other hand, are very welcoming to Sherlock, who has returned. Jane even generously invites Sherlock to live on their farm for a week. Sherlock's eyebrows jumped when he heard this. He didn't realize that Jane is also a big American landowner. Chapter 115 Falling in Love with Sherlock, Part 1. The three of them spent some time at the market. Seeing that business was slow, Jane told Sherlock and Thor to pack up and go home. After a busy day, they shambled in Jane's beat-up pickup truck to a slightly dilapidated farm not far from town. It was only then that Sherlock and Thor realized Jane had no family left, and that the farm was the last thing her father had left her. Listening to Jane's slightly saddened explanation, Thor, a man of considerable strength, immediately offered to help Jane repair the farm, and that his good brother Sherlock would also lend a hand. Although Sherlock was reluctant to share Thor's hard labor, he felt obliged to accept the offer, vowing to himself that if he failed, he would secretly switch to his main character and fire hundreds of rounds at the farm to restore it to its original state. Despite his thoughts, Sherlock's immersion in farm life inevitably led him to become addicted. Perhaps due to the awakening of the farming bloodline within his soul, Sherlock surprisingly had no aversion to farm life. Although each day was tiring, it felt fulfilling and refreshing. If anything, Sherlock found the daily feeding of dog food a bit too much. Fortunately, the farm was well stocked, and Sherlock said he didn't hear any unspeakable noises at night. Otherwise, he wouldn't have wanted to stay there even a minute longer. Under Jane's guidance, the three of them gradually settled into peaceful and regular routine. In the mornings, they would go to the market to sell potted plants, which were Jane's only current produce. At noon, they would grab lunch and buy their groceries. In the afternoon, Thor and Sherlock would playfully repair the farm and prepare the plants for the next day. Jane, taking advantage of their childish banter, would prepare the ingredients for dinner and breakfast. 4 days passed peacefully, and Sherlock even began to feel a little reluctant to leave his farm life. But it was clear that fate would never allow Sherlock to live such a smooth life. On the morning of the 5th day, while the group was enjoying themselves at their stall, a woman appeared, disrupting the three's peaceful life. It all started when Sherlock was left at the stall, watching over a simple potted plant. A woman appeared before Sherlock, mentally cursing Jane and Saul for being abusive, while reading a novel. Sherlock was stunned by the person before him. The reason was simple: this woman perfectly matched Sherlock's aesthetic standards, not given the slightest deviation. Anne Hathaway. Surprised, Sherlock even called out the woman's name. Hearing Sherlock's words, and seeing him stare blankly at her, the woman didn't even smile before addressing him. "I'm sorry, I'm afraid you've got the wrong person. My name is Anna Hathaway." Sherlock still hadn't come back to his senses after hearing Anna's self-introduction. Deep down, he was howling with excitement. Could it be that Big Brother Deadpool really heard my call? Although he didn't steal Catwoman, he had stolen Anne Hathaway from a parallel world? Seeing Sherlock still staring at her blankly, Anna stretched out her hand and waved it in front of Sherlock's eyes with a bit of amusement. Sherlock suddenly came back to his senses, like a little fan meeting his idol, and nervously said his name to Anna. "Oh, excuse me, my name is Sherlock Phoenix. How can I help you?" Hearing Sherlock's words, Anna smiled helplessly and continued to talk to Sherlock. "Well, I'm sure you've got the wrong person, but it's okay. I don't mind too much. Could you tell me about these flowers? I'd like to buy a potted plant." Hearing Anna's words, Sherlock finally came to his senses and quickly introduced his flower collection to Anna. To Sherlock's surprise, although the beauty before him bore a striking resemblance to Anne Hathaway, appearing delicate and frail, her personality was completely different, giving Sherlock the feeling of being in the presence of Catwoman. She chose the potted plants like a kitten, filled with curiosity about each plant. After carefully selecting, she finally bought a small pot of common roses and a pot of mint. Sherlock accepted the cash Anna handed him in a daze, and even after Anna left, he didn't recover. Even Jane and Thor, who were watching from the sidelines, didn't notice Sherlock. When Jane and Thor exchanged a glance, Thor saw a devilish smile in Jane's eyes and instantly understood her intentions. As a couple, the two naturally worked in perfect harmony. They rushed to Sherlock's side and launched into a flurry of romantic success stories, with Jane as the main force and Thor as the supporting force. Sherlock, still mesmerized by Anna's stunning beauty, didn't react at all, seemingly blinded by Jane and Thor's bluffing. Without a moment's hesitation, he dashed in the direction Anna had left. As Sherlock left, Jane and Thor's eyes lit up with laughter. It was unbelievable that someone like Sherlock could actually fall in love. Overwhelmed with passion, Sherlock summoned up all the courage he had in 2 lifetimes combined, ran to Anna's car, stopped it, and pulled out his phone, demanding her contact information. His impulsive actions left Anna stunned. Fortunately, despite his impulsiveness, Sherlock had a handsome face and a striking figure. Anna agreed to Sherlock's request, even embracing a date. Sherlock's blood boiled with excitement, feeling as if a huge pie had fallen from the sky and landed squarely on his head. In that instant, Thor's image loomed large in Sherlock's mind. "Thor, you'll always be my good brother. I'll never call you idiot again." Anna found Sherlock's naive expression quite amusing. After all, a man with an Eastern mindset like Sherlock was a rare sight in the Western world, and naturally piqued Anna's interest. With nothing else to do, Anna was in no hurry to leave. She got out of the car, locked it, and began strolling around town with Sherlock. Anna was astonished by Sherlock's Eastern mindset, combining reserve with warmth, and his gentlemanly and enthusiastic demeanor. She developed a fondness for him. Sherlock, in turn, was struck by Anna's generosity, fun, kindness, and even a touch of unyielding spirit. Their conversation, like a raging fire, grew increasingly heated. The only thing Sherlock might not have been telling the truth about was his profession. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Sherlock Falls in Love, Part 2. After all, Sherlock's profession was a difficult one to explain. How could Sherlock explain it? The head of the Novus village, the East Coast's largest underground hidden profession? Asgard's biggest arms dealer? A wizard from the Avengers? An unnamed disciple of Camerteheim, the Ancient One's vassal? Any of these things would either sound extremely punishable or simply unbelievable to the average person. So, after much deliberation, Sherlock could only tell Anna that he had simply inherited a small fortune from his parents and opened a gun shop to make ends meet. After all, guns weren't banned here, so running a gun shop was just a small business. At most, Sherlock's gun shop had grown a few billion in size, and his after-sales service had increased by a few billion, which was perfectly fine. Anna, on her part, apologized for Sherlock's parents leaving and, with her exceptional emotional intelligence, immediately changed the subject, introducing her profession. This was actually the first time Sherlock had heard of the profession of art exhibition curator. His primary responsibility is to fly around the world, arranging exhibitions and art sales for various artists, thereby maximizing their value. The two spent an entire afternoon strolling through the small town. Remarkably, a wizard like Sherlock felt no fatigue at all, even a hint of reluctance. Furthermore, Anna had become even more direct throughout the afternoon. Like a cute kitten, she seemed to be filled with curiosity about everything. She always noticed small details and was eager to share them. As the saying goes, it starts with appearance, falls into personality, and ends with character. Sherlock felt he had reached the second stage. The two strolled into the evening, and Sherlock invited Anna to dinner. He learned of her situation, which had led her there because of a colleague. Her colleague's sudden death had left Anna feeling the uncertainty of life, leaving her feeling like she was holding her breath. So, she took some time off and took a vacation, and the small town became her vacation spot. After dinner, Sherlock dropped Anna off at a rented guest house and arranged to meet again the next day. Anna naturally agreed to Sherlock's invitation. After spending the afternoon together, she found Sherlock quite interesting and seemed interested in further developing their relationship. She also secretly admired his gentlemanly demeanor. After all, this was Sherlock, a Westerner, after a pleasant afternoon date, might have simply invited him to spend the night. But Sherlock clearly had no such intentions. After agreeing on a meeting place, Sherlock stood on the street, watching Anna's bedroom light turn on before hailing a taxi back to Jane's farm. All of this, of course, caught Anna's eye from behind the curtains, and her opinion of Sherlock soared. Jane and Sol were both incredibly surprised to see Sherlock return that evening. They hadn't even thought he would be back. Sherlock rolled his eyes, especially Sol, who told him that Sherlock felt as if he wasn't spending time with Anna, but rather engaging in an illegal activity punishable by 7 days of administrative detention. Of course, now that Sherlock had returned, Jane and Thor wouldn't let him off the hook. A three-way trial ensued. Sherlock didn't hold back, and gave them a rundown. Thor's expression, as if he'd finally gotten his brother's big prize, his sly expression almost made Sherlock want to smack him in the face, wasn't Jane's sensible side. After all, Anna wasn't from the town, and the two knew her only from Sherlock's stories. So, as a friend, she told Sherlock she wanted to invite Anna to dinner at the farm the following evening. Thor immediately agreed. Though a simpleton, Thor didn't expect as much as Jane thought, but the thought of himself being a helping hand filled him with excitement. Under pressure from the two, Sherlock and Anna texted to explain the situation, and Anna readily agreed. After telling Jane the news, Sherlock, radiating pink, went to chat with Anna on the phone. The next morning, Sherlock was stunned when he saw Anna again in the taxi. Today's Anna seemed completely different from yesterday. If yesterday's Anna was the idyllic girl next door, today's Anna's radiance rivaled even the glamorous Hollywood stars. Her smooth hair was tied up in a bun, her makeup exquisitely applied, a pearl necklace adorned her swan-like neck, and her tight black dress accentuated her alluring curves. What Sherlock found most striking was the black stockings she wore. Even more striking, the stockings had a black seam running down the back. Combined with her high heels, the mere sight of them was enough to overwhelm Sherlock. Anna's outfit inexplicably made Sherlock feel like he'd traveled back to a Batman storyline, confronting Catwoman burglarizing Wayne Manor. Damn it! Sherlock, whose first love was in 2 lifetimes, couldn't handle such an outfit. He couldn't. Anna also noticed Sherlock standing not far from her, blushing like a monkey's bottom. She felt amusement in her heart, and also a little teasing. She gracefully walked over to Sherlock's side and gently took his arm. Feeling Sherlock's body tense up, Anna whispered a question in his ear with a smile. "Does it look good?" That one word instantly broke Sherlock's defenses. Having never held hands in 2 lifetimes, how could Sherlock resist such temptation? His already red face was now redder than ever. His entire body froze, and he couldn't even speak. This made Anna laugh uncontrollably, as if she had discovered something amusing. Fortunately, despite the overwhelming pressure, Sherlock forced himself to calm down and stammered his approval of Anna's outfit. At least they hadn't missed their date. But today's Anna was different from yesterday. To Sherlock, every casual touch of her hair or smile she gave him was full of allure. No, to be more precise, it was a combination of temptation and beauty, a pure yet deadly attraction. Sherlock spent the entire day in a daze, not even realizing anything. The sun was almost setting. If Anna hadn't reminded him, Sherlock would have forgotten that they had a dinner party with Jane that evening. Chapter 117, The Disappeared Anna and Sherlock Who Travels Thousands of Miles to Chase His Wife. Thanks to Anna's reminder, Sherlock remembered that Jane and Thor were still waiting for him at the farm, so he drove Anna's car to Jane's farm. But there was no other way, because Sherlock's car was still under repair and he couldn't drive it out. When they arrived at Jane's farm, Jane had already prepared a table full of delicious food for them, and Anna was surprised to see Thor at the table. After all, Thor was one of the Avengers in the Battle of New York, and looking around the world, the most talked about topic right now is probably the Battle of New York. As expected, the topic of everyone's conversation quickly focused on Thor, and Thor did not hide anything. He openly recounted the whole process of how they met and what happened in the Battle of New York. Of course, Thor did not miss any of Sherlock's pranks, and he told Anna the whole process in detail. Sherlock was constantly having to explain himself, blushing profusely. He mentally cursed Thor for being so rude. He'd just released Thor from his blacklist a few days ago, and now, without a second thought, Sherlock had added him back. Damn it, you're telling me off in front of this beautiful woman. Things change over time, Thor, you idiot, just wait for me. Aside from this nefarious friend and their sworn brother, Sherlock was most surprised by Jane and Anna's relationship. In a matter of seconds, their bond blossomed like a rocket. Before they'd even finished their meal, they were close confidants. Plus, Jane's face resembled Natalie Portman, giving Sherlock the feeling he wasn't at a farm dinner table, but at some Hollywood awards ceremony, where Natalie and Hathaway were competing. The dinner was a resounding success for both host and guest. Thor, that idiot, even righteously invited Anna to spend the night at the farm, citing the abundance of rooms. Sherlock's eyebrows twitched at this. Thor could hear this little plot from so far away. But what Sherlock didn't expect was that Anna, after a furtive glance at him, actually agreed. Sherlock blushed. Should he go see Anna tonight? Or Anna? Well, despite their best plans, and Sherlock feeling like he could take things a step further with Anna tonight, things didn't go as planned. Unfortunately, things didn't always go as planned. Shortly after finishing dinner, Anna received a call from her boss, seemingly with something urgent that needed her attention. Helplessly, Sherlock could only watch as Anna headed to the airport. He received a sweet kiss before a hasty farewell. Luckily, they still had contact information, so while they couldn't meet in person, it didn't stop them from communicating. So, for the 3 days after Anna left, Sherlock relied on text messages to soothe his longing. But what puzzled Sherlock was that, after 3 days of being fine, Anna inexplicably disappeared on the 4th day. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. No one could find her by phone, text, or even online. Sherlock's messages went unanswered, leaving him devastated. Having never been in a relationship before, Sherlock even felt like he'd been heartbroken. Fortunately, Jane and Sol were kind enough to offer comfort, and Sol even wondered if Anna had been in danger or had her phone stolen. Sol's silence would have been fine, but when he did, Sherlock became even more worried, becoming a bit panicked. Finally, Jane made the final decision, to go find Anna. Sherlock was a bit apprehensive about Jane's suggestion, fearing she might misunderstand him, and he hesitated to take the plunge. He also had no idea where Anna was. Could this possibly faze a doctor like Jane? After some persuasion, Sherlock finally agreed to go and see what was going on with Anna. After all, even if it was a breakup, Sherlock wanted to get things straight. As for Anna's location, Jane immediately put her computer skills to use. After a series of elaborate operations on the computer, she successfully located Anna's last known location, London. Sherlock was stunned by the series of operations, feeling overwhelmed with a sense of awe. The group decided that wherever they went was a vacation, so a visit to London would be fine. Finding Anna would be a double joy, while failing to find her would be a trip. The only problem was Thor. Thor didn't have his hammer, so flying there was impossible. But as for flying, the alien Thor had no credentials to even board a plane. He didn't even have a driver's license. Fortunately, Sherlock was quite capable. He called Tony on the spot and requested Tony's private jet. That same afternoon, the group rushed to the airport and embarked on their journey to London. Travel heals everything. This isn't just a saying. Sherlock felt a sense of healing just from the moment they sat on the plane. Coupled with Jane and Sol's influence, he gradually forgot his deepest anguish. Sherlock was a naturally open-minded person, and the combined opportunities of his two lives were primarily focused on a life of ease and fun. Thus, Sherlock gradually let go of his worries about Anna on the plane and began to chat and laugh with Jane and Sol. After all, as Jane had said, if they found her, it would be a double joy, but if they didn't, they could just treat it as a breakup and a relaxing trip. Soon after the plane landed, they happily landed on London soil, declining Tony's arranged ride and happily taking a local taxi. More importantly, Sherlock didn't want Tony to know what he was doing there, otherwise, he'd be ridiculed. Jane and Sol had no objection to Sherlock's arrangement. The main thing was companionship. John Bull's taxi is unique in the world. The small car full of British style can actually carry 6 passengers, and the luggage is placed on the passenger seat. The people who saw it were all amazed, and then they all squeezed into the car. After telling the driver the hotel, they discussed how to find Anna all the way. Basically, taxi drivers all over the world have a common problem, that is, they are very talkative. In just a short while, the driver started chatting with Sherlock and the other two. Sherlock had nothing to be ashamed of. After all, he didn't know the driver. After explaining their purpose frankly, he received the taxi driver's frequent attention. It was an ordinary trip so far, but soon, Sherlock found out that he was wrong, and he was wrong in an outrageous way. This trip was an unexpected overtime trip from the beginning. Chapter 118 Sherlock is kidnapped. The three of them discussed for a long time in the taxi, and then Jane finally remembered to check what art exhibitions were currently going on in London. After all, according to Anna, he was an art exhibition planner, so he must be closely related to art exhibitions. However, when Jane took out her phone and turned it on, the driver, who had been talking to them through headphones, seemed to change his expression slightly, but the person sitting in the car didn't notice this abnormality. After entering London's city centre, the driver's radio began to play traffic reports. Listening to the traffic report, Sherlock was surprised to find that the congested road was the only way to the hotel they had booked. Sherlock was exhausted after flying for more than 10 hours and didn't want to experience the typical London traffic jam. He asked the driver directly if they could take a detour so that they could quickly get to the hotel to rest and recover from the jet lag. The driver naturally agreed, turned the steering wheel, and drove into a small street. Sherlock and the others paid no attention until, for some unknown reason, Jane, clutching her phone to check, seemed to lose control of her eyelids, her neck twisting, and she lost consciousness. Sherlock and Thor only then sensed something was amiss. Seeing them grow alert, the driver dropped his pretense and pressed a button on the steering wheel. Instantly, a sweet, cloying aroma, accompanied by a puff of white mist, began to permeate the passenger compartment. Thor was closest to the plume, and within a few breaths, Sherlock watched as the Asgardian warrior slumped limply in his seat. Sherlock tried to cover his mouth and nose, but his hands were too weak to lift. All he could do was watch helplessly as the driver in front of him cursed at the top of his lungs. "Fuck you." Before he could even finish his words, Sherlock felt his vision go black and he lost consciousness completely. It must be said that Sherlock lived up to his reputation as a fun person. Before he lost consciousness, Sherlock's thoughts, aside from insults directed at the driver, were limited to one thought. This time, the fun was truly fucking great. When Sherlock regained consciousness, he found himself in a cave. It didn't look like it was artificially excavated, but rather like a legitimate natural cave. The difference was that, despite being naturally formed, the cave was filled with traces of human intervention. Fluorescent lights shone brightly throughout the cavern, leaving no blind spots. Rows of shelves were neatly arranged against the walls, each filled with transparent, rectangular boxes. Sherlock couldn't see the contents, but they looked like all sorts of insects. Sherlock himself was bound to a chair, a cloth band around his mouth preventing him from making any sound. Facing Sherlock was a large, tightly closed iron door that looked incredibly heavy. Atop it were rows of ventilation holes, ensuring the cave remained airtight. He moved his stiff neck. Good, at least he could move it. Sherlock felt pain everywhere. Tilting his head, Sherlock spotted Thor beside him. Compared to him, Thor's treatment was far superior. Sherlock was merely bound, but it was clear the kidnappers knew him, aware of his status as a hero of the Battle of New York. Thor was thus bound to the chair with a variety of steel bars, the sheer number of which made Sherlock feel like an iron virgin. Furthermore, the kidnappers were so ruthless that they even barricaded Thor's head and mouth. Sherlock could at least move his head, but Thor could only move his eyes. After whimpering a few times, Thor finally awoke to Sherlock's cries. Upon waking, Thor was clearly stunned, then began to struggle violently. Unfortunately, Thor, the hammer god, was unable to free himself from the bars. Unaware of the kidnappers' tactics, Sherlock didn't dare struggle violently. After all, in this modest cave, Sherlock hadn't spotted any sign of Jane. Just as Sherlock was contemplating whether to use magic to escape, the iron gate opposite him swung open. A group of men in elegant suits filed in. The most striking figure was the man at the front, wearing a white lab coat over his suit, resembling a researcher. The man in the lab coat ignored Thor's struggles and came directly to Sherlock. He removed the bandage from Sherlock's mouth and spoke in a voice almost like an aria. "I never thought our planner even knew the Avengers. But the Avengers aren't that powerful, are they?" These words effectively left Sherlock speechless. Planner? What planner? How could he not have known about this other identity? What are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about. Why are you kidnapping us? Sherlock decided to hold off for now, until he could figure out what was going on. Meanwhile, Thor, drawn in by Sherlock and the white coat's words, stopped struggling and stared intently at the white coat, seemingly intent on killing him with his gaze. The white coat, sensing a trick, turned and glared at Sherlock, grabbing him by the collar and approaching him fiercely. "Stop pretending. Planner. We know it's you. Now, tell me the password. Otherwise, even your Avengers friends will die here because of you." "I swear," the white coat lashed out at Sherlock, even as he mentioned Thor, his eyes casting a disdainful glance at the restrained Thor beside him. This time, Sherlock was completely stunned, staring at the white coat in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. "Password? What password?" "Whatever you want, I can only tell you I don't know. You've got the wrong guy. Where's the girl we were with?" Hearing Sherlock not only refuse to answer his question but even dare to ask it back, the white-coated doctor seemed completely enraged. He casually took a transparent box from the shelf and, using long-handled tweezers, pulled out a bug the size of a child's fist and held it in front of Sherlock. "Last chance, planner. Trust me, you won't like the consequences of your resistance. If you don't tell me, I'll place this little cutie against your artery. Trust me, one bite and you'll experience the ultimate ecstasy. Oh, and don't be afraid. This insect is kind. Its venom isn't immediately fatal. You'll swell and fester all over, and eventually, in a dozen hours, you'll die. Tell me the password. Otherwise, I'll let this little cutie give you a gentle kiss on the neck." Looking at the giant bug struggling in the tweezers, Sherlock admitted that at that moment, he was truly panicking. Before crossing over, Sherlock had experienced a childhood trip to the south where a giant, flying cockroach, the size of a palm, slammed into his mouth. Had Sherlock not shut up quickly, he might have tried cockroach sashimi. This experience led to Sherlock's continued dislike of insects even after crossing over. Fortunately, thanks to magic, insects were largely invisible to Sherlock. Now, the man in the white coat waved a baby fist-sized insect before Sherlock, instantly igniting his fear of insects. Filled with fear, Sherlock almost forgot his magic skills and, relying solely on instinct, began to struggle, instinctively trying to get away from the insect. Sherlock's action seemed to greatly satisfy the man in the white coat's perverted desires, as he continued to hold the insect closer to Sherlock, trying to force him to reveal the information he desired. Just as the man in the white coat was about to continue threatening Sherlock, the door behind him exploded with a deafening bang. With the sound of an explosion, the once heavy door collapsed to the ground in an instant. A nimble woman in combat fatigues, gun in hand, rushed into the small cave. A few bursts of fire knocked out everyone in the cave, leaving Sherlock and Thor stunned. When the woman removed her mask in front of them, their eyes widened. The reason was simple: both Sherlock and Thor knew this woman, especially Sherlock, who knew her very well. Anna. Chapter 119, Agent Storm, right? Anna, then, the two of them immediately called out the person's name. Yes, the muffled voice at the back was Thor's. Sherlock looked at the dashing Anna, and memories instantly flooded his mind, from their first encounter with Anna to his inexplicable kidnapping. Sherlock felt as if his CPU was about to explode. Thor, on the other hand, looked like his brain was overloaded, as if his head was itching for brains. Anna simply ignored the two shocked people, casually drawing the dagger from her thigh and wordlessly severing the ropes holding Sherlock. Then, she spun around to Thor's side, examining the chair that bound him. She quickly noticed something different, and with a gentle press somewhere, the metal bars holding Thor loosened instantly. They both quickly gathered themselves, but they didn't know how to face the dashing Anna before them. Anna didn't say much, casually tossing the pistol from her waistband to Sherlock. You know how to use a gun, right? Be careful. We need to get out of here before the alarm sounds. With that, she ignored Sherlock and Thor's reactions and headed straight for the blown open iron gate. Only then did Sherlock and Thor react, frantically putting their weapons away. Sherlock, feeling like he had a lot of things to say, quickly followed Anna, gun raised, and asked, "What's going on?" "Anna, who are you?" Gazing at Sherlock's eagerness, Anna pondered for a moment before sighing helplessly. "Kay, get ready. We need to leave now," Anna replied succinctly, not giving Sherlock a chance to reply before moving on. But just as Anna was about to move forward, Thor, standing behind her, was the first to react and shouted, "Wait! We're about to fight, right? Leave it to me, Thor," Thor said, raising his arm with a carefree air. Meanwhile, in Asgard, a craftsman in charge of weapons maintenance carefully completed the final touches on Meowth's hammer. Looking at the hammer sitting on the shelf, he wiped the sweat from his head with satisfaction. Just as he was about to record the daily maintenance of Meowth's hammer in his work log, the hammer on the shelf began to vibrate violently. The next second, Meowth's hammer flew directly towards the craftsman, making direct contact with the craftsman's face, knocking him flat on his back and sending him flying towards the wall behind him. If nothing unexpected happened, Meowth's hammer might pass through the walls of the Asgardian palace, across the vast universe, and come to Earth to find Thor, because Thor had summoned Meowth's hammer. Sadly, just as Meow hammer was about to touch the wall, a massive, aged hand suddenly grasped its handle. Seeing Meow hammer struggling in his grasp, Odin, the God King, sighed with regret. "Mjolnir, sometimes your master needs to go through things alone, so leave this time to him." With these words, Meow hammer finally ceased its struggles. Looking at the unyielding face of the craftsman imprinted on the newly repaired Meow hammer, then at the unconscious craftsman lying on the ground, Odin sighed helplessly and began to direct the men to deal with the aftermath. Across the earth, Sherlock and Anna watched Thor, speechless after posing for a full 30 seconds without any results, feeling even a little embarrassed. After a moment, Sherlock finally remembered something and looked at Thor tentatively. "Thor, I don't think you brought Meowth's hammer." A flicker of embarrassment crossed Thor's face after hearing Sherlock's words, his demeanor vanishing in an instant. He returned to his position behind Sherlock, hunched over, and addressed him sternly. "His name is Mjolnir, not Meowth's hammer." Anna rolled her eyes helplessly at Thor's seemingly joking behavior, then drew her rifle again and prepared to advance. Just then, a piercing alarm blared throughout the cave. Hearing the shrill siren, Anna rolled her eyes again helplessly and called to the two men standing on the other side of the door. "Follow me." With that, she charged out, her rifle raised. Compared to the cave they had just been in, the passage beyond the main door was undoubtedly much darker. Of course, the cave's interconnected and dark atmosphere also had its advantages. It provided them with maximum concealment. Anna's marksmanship was excellent. Holding her victor, she charged forward, firing bursts of fire, each time sending an enemy plummeting. Sherlock and Thor followed behind Anna, with Sherlock occasionally supporting her in the lead with his pistol. He also kept an eye on the passageway behind him, wary of any incoming enemies. Thor even scavenged a submachine gun from an enemy. Having never used a firearm before, Thor was intrigued by it and, imitating Sherlock, joined in the fray. But his accuracy was questionable. He was a true master of human form, and if Thor had any talent for shooting, he wouldn't have used the melee hammer. Furthermore, Thor, untrained, would occasionally inadvertently aim his gun at Sherlock, who was standing in front of him, causing Sherlock to shudder. If Thor accidentally discharged his weapon, his ass would be in tatters. Just when Sherlock was trying to find a reason to remove the gun from Thor's hand, Thor seemed to remember something and grabbed Sherlock. "Wait a minute. Sherlock, Anna, where is Jane? We must find Jane." After hearing Thor's words, Sherlock and Anna were stunned. Just as Sherlock was about to say something, Anna interrupted Sherlock's mouth. "Jane is not here. To be exact, Jane is missing. Only the two of you are caught here." Anna did not even turn her head while speaking, and she kept firing. Sherlock was not idle either. He used 2 shots from the pistol and 1 shot from the head to eliminate the enemy, while constantly approaching Anna. Sherlock finally seized the opportunity while Anna was changing the magazine. "Jane is missing? What does that mean? What is going on?" Chapter 120, Agent Storm, right? Anna, listening to Sherlock's words, answered his questions while firing. "Literally. When I arrived, the scene was utterly devastated. It looked like 2 factions had engaged in a brutal battle. Eggshells and corpses were everywhere. It even made headlines. The media described it as a terrorist attack on par with the Battle of New York. My subsequent investigations revealed that you and Thor were abducted here. Jane vanished without a trace, as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. If nothing unexpected happened, she must have been taken over by another mysterious force." Anna's tone was calm, but her words were shocking. "What?" Sherlock's mind froze for a moment. He couldn't understand what had happened. A major battle? Holy crap! Thor and I, amidst the whirlwind of bullets, emerged unscathed. It was truly a miracle. But Sherlock quickly seized the opportunity, seizing the moment when no one was around and grabbing Anna as she tried to move forward. "Wait a minute. You said it was on the front page? Damn, what date is it?" Anna turned to look at the bewildered Sherlock and snapped out a date. After hearing Anna's words, Sherlock was completely taken aback. He and Thor had been drugged for a whole week? Were these people animals? No. Did they think Thor and I were animals? No. Even if Sean was an animal, he couldn't have been drugged for so long. Just as Sherlock was bewildered and lamenting the inexplicable loss of a week in his life, a group of people had quietly crept up behind the 3 of them. Fortunately, Thor noticed them and shouted, "Be careful." Thor then imitated Sherlock and began firing back. However, compared to Thor's shooting skills, the well-equipped enemy was clearly much stronger. Sherlock only heard Thor scream, then immediately reacted, shouted Thor's name, and immediately raised his gun to return fire. After all, Sherlock had undergone 7 years of military training under his 5 uncles and had even worked as a hitman for a continental hotel. His marksmanship was naturally impeccable. In a flash, he emptied his magazine with 7 rounds, sending the opposing team of 7 men, each one with a bullet hole between their brows, collapsing to the ground. Sherlock's incredible skill made Anna look at him with awe. Fortunately, Sherlock didn't pay much attention to her at the moment, rushing to Thor's side and sadly helping him up. Before Sherlock could begin to mourn, Thor opened his eyes and rubbed his wounded abdomen, wailing on the ground like a boiled shrimp. Shocked, Sherlock frantically peeled off Thor's clothes. There was no bullet hole, only the bullet lodged firmly in his skin and a large purple bruise from the impact. Oh my goodness, so Asgardians aren't just bulletproof armor, they're also bulletproof flesh? Watching Thor howling non-stop on the ground, Sherlock felt as if all his worries had been wasted. He even felt the urge to fire a few more shots at Thor. Fortunately, before Sherlock could strike, Anna stopped him from retaliating and shouted at the two men in a sullen tone. "Get up if you're alright, our equipment won't last much longer." Sherlock then angrily pulled Thor up from the ground and shoved him in front of Anna. "Here. A bulletproof meat shield, duh. That's handy." Thor's face was filled with doubt as he listened to Sherlock's words. "Damn it. I treat you like a brother, and you treat me like a meat shield, right?" Anna ignored Sherlock's witty remarks and casually pulled Thor behind her before continuing forward, gun in hand. But Sherlock, full of doubts, was no way he was going to let Anna go. "Wait, tell me who the planner is?" "They keep calling me the planner." Anna, like a cat whose tail has been stepped on, flew into rage after hearing Sherlock's words. She rushed over to Sherlock and shoved him against the wall. "They're asking you about the planner? The planner fell for that shoddy trap in London? WTF. Stop kidding." Putting aside Anna's emotions, words, and the surroundings, their positions were quite ambiguous, resembling a wall-dong, albeit a reverse one where the woman was stronger and the man was weaker. Thor, having just recovered, turned around and saw Anna pressing Sherlock against the wall. Perhaps due to the dim lighting or the pain he had just suppressed, Thor hadn't heard their conversation. Seeing their intimate gestures, Thor was speechless. "Hey, can you two pay attention to the situation? Is this the time for you two to be in a relationship?" It would have been fine if Thor hadn't said anything, but once he did, the two quickly realized what was happening and cursed him in unison. "Get lost." Seeing that the two men seemed uneasy, Thor scratched his head in embarrassment. Anna rolled her eyes at Sherlock before ignoring them and continuing forward with her gun drawn. Luckily, no enemies appeared. The three of them rounded a corner and arrived at a large, bright cavern that resembled a cavern's kitchen, complete with iron tables and utensils. As soon as the three entered the cavern, a large number of armed enemies emerged from the opposite passage. In a panic, Sherlock overturned the table in front of him and covertly cast a protective spell on it. Sherlock didn't want to be shot to pieces while hiding behind it. Listening to the constant crackle of bullets hitting the table, Sherlock leaned back, pistol in hand, and sighed. What kind of art exhibition planner is this? As soon as he finished speaking, Sherlock realized what was happening and looked at Anna, who was hiding beside him, with a look of shock. "Fuck, you're the mastermind." Anna rolled her eyes in annoyance at Sherlock, who had reacted. After saying "cover me" to Sherlock, she flew behind the stove. Seeing that Anna seemed to be about to start a counterattack, Sherlock reacted in an instant, casually took out a grenade from the library, pulled out the safety and threw it behind him. With the sound of an explosion, the whole cave fell silent in an instant. Seeing that all the enemies were dealt with, Anna stood up from behind the stove with a puzzled look on her face, looked at the scene in confusion, and turned to look at Sherlock. "Where did you get the grenade?" Chapter 121, Agent Storm, right? At Anna's question, Sherlock retorted in a gruff voice. "What do you care?" He then headed straight for the cave across the way, not forgetting to pick up a gun along the way. Thor stood still, looking at Sherlock, who was leading the charge, then at Anna, who stood behind the stove with a complicated expression. He shrugged helplessly and followed Sherlock's lead. After passing the kitchen cave, the three encountered no more enemies and made their way out of the cave smoothly. As soon as he emerged and took in the scenery before him, Sherlock was stunned. Although he knew he couldn't stay in London after being unconscious for a week, the desolate landscape before him was a bit exaggerated. Sherlock even swore that if London had such a desert landscape, Sherlock would devour the British Isles whole. Seeing Sherlock staring at the scene in silence, Anna came up from behind and patted Sherlock on the shoulder, bringing him back to consciousness. "Where the hell is this?" Sherlock demanded, searchingly questioning Anna. "The Middle East," Anna replied succinctly, without a moment's hesitation. Sherlock was speechless. Besides the horrible shield situation, these terrorists were capable of getting two fully fledged individuals from London to the middle of nowhere in the Middle East without anyone noticing. Damn, how could you possibly be a terrorist? Aren't the 5 social insurances, 1 housing fund, and statutory holidays great? And what the hell, the built-in medical leave? Sherlock couldn't understand it, absolutely nothing. Anna ignored Sherlock's solitary lamentations and led Thor towards the 2 ATVs near the cave entrance. The ATVs were clearly high-end, with their massive machine guns. They were definitely the best of the best. Even if they weren't, They could still blast the other vehicles ahead of them, and then become the best of the best in the series. What are you looking at? Come here. We have to. Anna hadn't finished her words when the roar of engines reached them from the distance. They looked over and saw a convoy of 5 vehicles speeding towards the cave entrance. Each vehicle sported a massive loud Ganma heavy machine gun, as if to declare the 2 ATVs nothing compared to them. Anna's face paled. Before anyone could react, a man emerged from the lead vehicle, wielding a weapon Sherlock knew all too well. He fired at the 2 ATVs. RPG, Sherlock shouted. Anna, pulling Thor beside her, dove to the ground. With a loud explosion, the 2 ATVs, originally intended as their escape route, were rendered useless. Anna's eyes twitched at the scene before her. She grabbed Thor and pulled him up, firing back helplessly with her own weapon while shouting at Sherlock, who had just risen. Run! With that, she led the way and jumped down the slope beside the road. Sherlock and Thor naturally followed Anna's example, sliding down the hillside like a slide. Seeing their escape, the jeeps armed with heavy machine guns turned around and chased them. Fortunately, a bus was wobbling along at the foot of the hill. Seeing this, Anna immediately transformed into a bandit, played the role of a robber, and hijacked the bus. Anyone who has seen the Pakistani mechanic knows that the condition of vehicles in the Middle East is a mess, from the inside out. Sherlock, who had just slid to the bottom of the slope, looked at the bus in front of him, which was decorated with lace bells and other decorations. He wondered if this wasn't just a way to get himself killed. Thor had no idea what was happening with the bus before him. Seeing Anna already on board, Thor, without a care in the world, grabbed Sherlock and hopped in. Seeing them both aboard and the pursuing vehicles close in on them, Anna stepped on the accelerator, sending the bus into reverse at breakneck speed. Sherlock was stunned. How could a car reverse at that speed? If I remembered correctly, it was in first gear, right? Could this car even have a second, third, or fourth gear? Not only Sherlock, but Thor was also stunned by Anna's impressive maneuvering, clinging to the handrails. Asgardians are only resilient, not immortal. While Anna's driving was impressive, and the bus's reverse speed was impressive, it was clear she was no match for the convoy moving forward. Within moments, the armored vehicles roared. The men who heard the gunfire flinched, and Thor roared even louder. Sherlock! Think of something. Aren't you a magician? Thor roared, and before Sherlock could react, Anna, who was driving, snapped. She turned and stared at Sherlock, demanding loudly. You're a magician. You never told me. Sherlock rolled his eyes helplessly at Anna's rant, and immediately retorted without a trace of politeness. We only went on a date once. And you didn't even tell me you were a K. Stop that flirting. Sherlock, think of something. We still have to find Jane. Seeing the two of them still having the time to argue, Thor felt his blood pressure spike, and inwardly regretted for the 508th time that he hadn't brought his Meowth hammer. After hearing Thor's roar, Sherlock glared at Anna fiercely, then pulled an RPG from his library, shouldered it, and stood up to fire. But Anna grabbed him. Do you want to die? The rocket's tail will blow the whole car over as soon as you fire it. Do it if you can, get out if you can't. Don't bother me while I'm driving. Hearing Anna's rant, Sherlock calmed down. Anna had a point. While RPGs were said to have no recoil, the tail flames from firing were no joke. If the area wasn't large enough, it could easily cause concussions on one of your own. Putting his RPG away in a huff, Sherlock whipped out a Ganma, the same model as the one facing him. Damn it, you're having fun shooting, right? I have one too. As for why Sherlock didn't use magic, it was simple. Sherlock didn't want to be exposed, especially in front of Thor. If Thor knew the wizard was him, the next time Thor saw the other Avengers, the entire Avengers would probably know his identity, and maybe even Black Egg. As for why he didn't use Kamartaj's magic to resolve the situation, it was partly because it was a rare trait, and Sherlock didn't want to turn so easily. Secondly, considering the Ancient One's acting skills and integrity, even though he was stabbed to death by his own apprentice, Sherlock felt that if he truly used Kamartaj's magic in front of these men who could silently appear in the Middle East from London, it might actually expose Kamartaj's existence. It's even possible that the Ancient One himself led the terrorists to Kamartaj, staging a scenario where the Sorcerer Supreme, who had protected Earth for over a century, was killed by a terrorist's bullet, forcing Sherlock to temporarily take over the role. From what Sherlock knew about the Ancient One, this scenario was absolutely possible, and the probability was not small. Not wanting to be a 24/7 worker, Sherlock didn't want to bet on the Ancient One's acting skills and integrity, even though he was stabbed to death by his own apprentice. Chapter 122, Agent Storm, right? She watched as Sherlock, preoccupied with casually placing a bottle of laudanum he'd pulled out of nowhere on the car's dashboard, then conjured a large pineapple and tossed it to Thor, who was standing behind him. He then sent Thor off to deal with a few enemies on motorcycles in their direction. Sherlock then thought for a moment and casually pulled out 3 headphones, one each for Thor, Anna, and himself. Anna immediately recognized them, Stark-made tactical headphones, seemingly modified to block out significant noise while still allowing for voices and footsteps on the battlefield, and even short-range radio communication. Anna felt her entire worldview undergo a drastic shock. You call this magic? No, Anna absolutely refused to admit it. While Sherlock's act of pulling out a massive heavy machine gun from nowhere was impressive, calling it magic was a stretch. After all, in Anna's mind, magic, if not a 100-meter-high blue wall of fire like in the Battle of New York, at least had to have some special effects, right? But look at Sherlock now. Apart from the muzzle flash, where was the trace of special effects? Forget about special effects. Sherlock and Thor, though both looked like they were the last person to be killed, even the smiles on their faces gradually began to shimmer as the firepower gradually covered them. But that record, how to describe it? It was a perfect example of what it meant to be a fierce tiger, and then look at the record. 0-9. Anna's eyes fluttered. She even looked at Sherlock with a hint of disdain. Although Anna knew in her heart that, aside from Thor, a novice who couldn't use a gun at all, giving him a gun and letting him stand back and fire was mainly for deterrence, Sherlock's inability to hit anyone had nothing to do with him. It's no secret that laudanum appears either on the roofs of highly capable off-road armored vehicles, on top of air-to-ground vehicles, or even in the back of a pickup truck. Invariably, these are hardwired to the vehicle or vehicle. But now, Sherlock's laudanum is simply placed on the dashboard. And with the shock absorbers on this bus, which has been in its twilight years, and can count the number of marble-sized pebbles it's rolled over, accurately hitting it is a bit of a challenge for Sherlock. Even so, Anna looked at Sherlock with a hint of disdain, as if to say, if a man is trusted, even a sow can climb a tree. Unfortunately, Sherlock caught Anna's fleeting expression. At that moment, Sherlock's fury exploded. What's that look in your eyes? What's that look in your eyes? I tell you what that look is. You up, no can no BB. I can't believe we've only been on 2 dates, and I'm already in this mess. Was he trying to have fun? He definitely was trying to have fun. Damn it. He was clearly having a great time, and this bastard actually dared to bite him back. At that moment, even Anna, with all her composure, couldn't help but snap. You bastard. First of all, you came to me on your own. And secondly, trouble? You're in this shit too, right? With your face like that, how could I believe your lies? A small gun shop owner? You don't even have your name on your profile, Anna, one hand on the steering wheel, the other pointing at Sherlock, mercilessly taunting him. So angry was she that she didn't even look at the road behind her, staring intently at Sherlock, as if she wanted to eat him up. Sherlock wasn't panicking at all, and immediately seized on the key point in Anna's words. Great, you finally let the cat out of the bag. You actually investigated me. Hearing Sherlock's rebuttal and questioning, Anna relaxed her composure. With a wave of her hand, she pointed at Thor, who was smiling and shooting from behind, covered in gunfire. Don't think I don't know. You're not what you said. I can't even trace how you got to London. Especially this guy. You bastard definitely didn't tell me the truth on our date. Sherlock felt his blood pressure soar, and he didn't even bother firing. He fought back the urge to slam the barrel of his laudanum gun into Anna's face, and retorted immediately. Haha, are you okay? Why do I have to report my presence to you? Besides, isn't it a bit difficult for the customs officers on Earth to expect an alien to enter the country legally? Besides, how do I know that everything you said on our date was true? I'm not even sure your name is Anna. I'm not even sure you took a vacation to relax because a colleague died. Listening to Sherlock's ruthless rebuttal, Anna felt her blood pressure suddenly rise. What on earth had possessed her to think this bastard in front of her was not bad? Fuck you. I'm telling the truth. Remember this. My name will always be Anna Hathaway. And I did take a vacation to relax because a colleague died. Because that colleague betrayed me. I killed him myself." Just as Sherlock was about to continue his verbal battle with Anna, Thor, who was firing and watching the show from behind, finally used up his bullets. Although he didn't kill anyone, Thor was satisfied at least. Listening to the two people's increasingly heated argument, Thor knew that he couldn't let them continue. After all, Jane's whereabouts were still unknown, and it was not the time to start quarreling within the team. Thor immediately spoke up to interrupt the two people's quarrel. "I say, can you two calm down? This is not a hotel bed. We are fighting. Can you be serious?" After hearing Thor's complaints, the two people who were originally angry glared at each other fiercely, and snorted in unison, indicating that they were willing to pay attention to each other, and started to do their own things. Thor couldn't help but sigh when watching this scene, and then as if he remembered something, he ran to Sherlock with a smirk and pointed at the big pineapple that had been thrown on the ground after the bullets were used up and said, "Sherlock, is there anything more powerful? I think this thing is much more exciting than the mignon. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, Agent Storm, right? Looking at Thor's sullen expression, Sherlock genuinely didn't want to bother with him. Sherlock had guns, and even more powerful ones than a big pineapple. But don't you look at yourself? You're a master of body contouring, the founder of the merciful gun technique, someone who believes you can kill with smoke rather than bullets. How dare you tell him the big pineapple wasn't powerful enough? But seeing Thor's starry eyes looking at him expectantly, Sherlock couldn't help but give up his position. On the one hand, the old Ganma was indeed much more powerful than the big pineapple. On the other hand, Sherlock really didn't want to be around Anna anymore. After all, this was the first time since he'd traveled through time that Sherlock had nearly been driven to the point of wanting to destroy the world by a little bitch. Just as Sherlock and Thor finished handing over their weapons under a hail of enemy fire, the bus began to resound with the roar of the old Ganma, mixed with Thor's maniacal laughter. However, Sherlock was left speechless. Thor, for some reason, fired. He could tolerate his laughter, but ever since he'd gained access to the loud Ganma, he'd started spouting dirty talk. It wouldn't be a big deal, but many of Thor's dirty talk were of the unspeakable kind, the kind that would get a whole book banned if just one line was written. Sherlock was speechless, unsure whether to criticize Thor's marksmanship or his dirty talk. The pursuers on the other side quickly noticed something was amiss. While they had no idea where they were getting their heavy firepower, the guy firing it was truly unremarkable. The heavy machine gun had been roaring for who knows how long, and aside from one unlucky guy who managed to bluff his way into a better shot, everyone who remained seated remained unscathed. Despite the enemy's mercy, soldiers still had to fight back, and they had to fight back. While their gunners were merciful, that didn't mean the driver was. Just look at the woman driving the bus. She relied on the bus's weight and the terrain to manage a car on her side, as well as numerous flanking motorcycles. The officer in the SUV, after a moment of leniency, decided to hold off firing. After all, the order was to capture them alive, so the best option was to jump aboard the bus and engage in close combat. As for the roaring machine gun, everyone ignored it. The gunners were merciless, especially the heavy machine gun, which paused for a moment before roaring again. Even the enemy couldn't reach them. Just as the group, braving Thor's barrage, emerged from the bus door and attempted to approach the bus, the roar of an even more restless engine echoed overhead. Before Sherlock and his pursuers could comprehend what was happening, 4 motorcycles sped down the winding mountain road. Each occupant was clad in a black bodysuit and a black helmet. Beyond the fact that their figures confirmed they were all women, no other information could be gathered. The 4 motorcycles were clearly superior to the pursuers' vehicles, closing in on them in a matter of seconds. Sherlock and his companions watched helplessly as several small discs ejected from the sides of the 4 motorcycles, affixing themselves to the vehicles before rapidly decelerating and exploding. The SUVs chasing the bus were instantly sent flying. Sherlock even spotted a man in camouflage, a helmet, and a bullet-carrying rig, flaming and terrified as he flew past the side of the bus. This sudden change left Sherlock and the other 2 unsure what to do. Unsure of their true purpose, Anna saw that the 4 motorcyclists were better equipped and more thoroughly trained than the pursuers, and she was instantly terrified. She didn't bother to determine whether they were friend or foe. Gritting her teeth, she unleashed her utmost driving skills, and slammed the steering wheel. With Anna's movement, the bus's front wheels practically hung in the air as it made a 180-degree U-turn on the narrow, winding mountain road. The immense momentum nearly sent Sherlock and Thor flying through the air. Fortunately, Thor reacted quickly, grabbing the nearby handrail and pulling Sherlock along. Otherwise, Sherlock would have been flung outward, like the poor old lady, into the valley. However, what puzzled the three was that the four motorcyclists didn't pursue Sherlock and the others. Instead, after dispatching the pursuers, they watched Sherlock and the others leave, then started their motorcycles again and headed in the opposite direction. Sherlock and the others were completely bewildered, unsure of what was going on. Even though they didn't know what was going on, at least they had escaped their pursuers. Anna immediately stepped on the bus's accelerator and quickly left this dangerous place. Half an hour later, with a shudder and a roar, the bus, which had experienced a baptism of fire and fierce driving, finally couldn't withstand the damage and was declared scrapped, stopping where it was. Anna opened the bus door without hesitation and jumped out, followed by Thor and Sherlock. None of the three said anything, only Thor looked back at the scrapped bus with reluctance. "Goodbye, my good friend, I will always remember the time when you fought alongside me as a comrade." Sherlock looked at Thor, tears welling in his eyes, and frowned. Why hadn't he noticed before that this silly Thor was so dramatic? Anna took Sherlock and Thor and walked for about half an hour before they arrived in front of a camouflaged car. Anna quickly tore off the camouflage on the car and got into the driver's seat without saying a word. Sherlock and Thor looked at each other and climbed into the back seat of the car tactfully. The three of them were silent along the way. With the rumbling sound of the car, Anna brought them to a bustling town and stopped the car in front of a two-story building that looked relatively intact. Seeing Anna stop the car and turn off the engine, Sherlock and Thor tactfully got out of the car and followed Anna into the two-story building. The moment the door of the cabin closed, Anna's face turned extremely ugly. Now, let's talk frankly. Chapter 124, Sherlock is Wanted, Part 1. Sherlock and Thor were also thinking along the same lines. While Sherlock found the journey thrilling and play yet fully involved, that didn't mean he relished being dragged into such trouble. Soon, after a discussion among the three of them, mostly Sherlock and Anna, they finally pieced together the whole story. First, Anna's colleague, a close friend of theirs, had betrayed Kay. To prove her innocence, she was assigned to eliminate the traitor. This left Anna feeling unhappy, and after completing her mission, she went on vacation, where she met Sherlock. The reason for her hasty departure from her date with Sherlock was that Kay had discovered that Anna's colleague had sold a biological weapon to an unidentified group. To resolve this issue, Kay urgently requested Anna return to the team to deal with it. Coincidentally, the traitor's colleague wasn't foolish either. He had used a highly secure box to sell the biological weapon. If the box is cracked without the code, the potion inside will be destroyed by its own mechanism. The middleman, having obtained the biological weapon, believes the code lies with Anna, who killed her traitor's colleague. Therefore, he sets up a plot in London to capture Anna. Unfortunately, instead of Anna, Sherlock and his group arrive, searching for her. Unaware, the middleman mistakenly believes Sherlock is Anna and launches his plan against him. However, just as the plan is about to begin, after Sherlock and his group have successfully rendered themselves unconscious, a group of individuals, more than one in number, appears out of nowhere, disrupting the middleman's plans. First, a group dressed identically to the women who had been pursuing them appears and engages the middleman. Then, another group, dressed similarly to the women, appears and engages them. The three groups engage in a frenzy of conflict. The middlemen, leveraging their numbers, manage to snatch Sherlock and Saul from a taxi. Jane, however, falls into the hands of one of the other two groups. After Anna receives the tip, she investigates Sherlock's whereabouts and bravely ventures into the cave. Despite having sorted out the entire story, Sherlock and Thor are still completely bewildered. Not to mention Thor, Sherlock's CPU feels like it's about to explode. Apart from those two unknown forces, the entire story seems incredibly melodramatic and Hollywood-esque, nothing more than a classic spy tale. It's a cliché story where the hero and heroine meet because of a traitor and then work together to defeat the villain and recover biological or nuclear weapons, but when those two unknown forces are added, things suddenly become even more confusing. What do those two forces want? Why are they attacking the middleman? What's the story behind the final force? Why are they attacking everyone? Sherlock, already bewildered, becomes even more bewildered after Anna and she gather the intelligence, completely unsure how to react. Even Anna, a seasoned agent, is bewildered, not even Sherlock, not understanding how she got the code to unlock the box. Just as the three of them stared at each other in silence, unsure of what to do next, Sherlock's phone suddenly rang. Sherlock had a habit of leaving all his valuables in the library, only to retrieve them once he was settled. This time, after boarding the car Anna had arranged, Sherlock quietly slipped some of the library's belongings into his trouser pockets. Glancing at the caller ID, the name Price blared brightly. Sherlock swallowed hard and answered the call tremblingly. Sherlock didn't know why he reacted this way. He was not one to settle down. He had been a killer, an avenger, and had even completed several military trainings. Normally, Price would have paid little attention to Sherlock. But for some reason, this time, the moment he saw the name on the phone, Sherlock suddenly felt a bad feeling. His premonition proved correct. As soon as he answered the phone, Price's roaring voice rang out. "You little brat. I told you to open a shop, but you refused. Where have you been? Why are you hanging around with K? How come I didn't know you had a code name for a planner in K? And what have you done? There's a bounty on the dark web for you. A $5 million bounty. Cash. Do you need me to read you the wanted poster? If you don't give me a perfect explanation, I'll absolutely break your legs," Cheyenne Price roared, and Sherlock unconsciously pulled the receiver further away from his ear. Even Anna and Thor could hear Price's roar. Sherlock swore he had never seen Price this angry since he'd traveled through time. From the tone of his voice, it was clear Price was more than just saying he wanted to break his legs. Sherlock didn't dare to hide anything and trembled as he told Price everything he knew. Hearing the whole story, Price was mesmerized. After a long pause, Price finally spoke. "Do you need me to bring some support?" Hearing Price's words, Sherlock quickly declined. Given Price's previous audacity, Sherlock dared not trouble his good uncle, fearing Price would actually come and break his legs first. After hearing Sherlock's refusal, Price pondered for a moment, then simply said, "Be careful," and hung up. Seeing Price hang up, Sherlock breathed a sigh of relief. He looked up at Anna and Thor's teasing gazes, which seemed off to Sherlock. Just as Sherlock was about to taunt back, his phone rang again. Thinking it was Price calling again, Sherlock answered without even glancing. But this time, the voice on the line wasn't Price's, but the one Sherlock least wanted to hear, Tony. "Hey, my dear nephew, do you want to hear what I discovered? What's the matter? Not only did you end up in a relationship in the Middle East, but you were also targeted by several forces? You're a planner? There's no way you, a fool, could have planned this. How about it? Do you want your dear uncle to help you? As long as you beg me, I will help you solve these troubles immediately," Tony said to Sherlock in a mean way on the phone. Chapter 125, Sherlock is Wanted, Part 2. Just hearing Tony's snarky tone on the phone, Sherlock felt like he was about to give up, the primal force within him urging him to punch him. While Sherlock and the other two certainly needed Tony's help right now, given Jane's location was still unclear, and even the identities of the other two factions were unknown, it was impossible for Sherlock to satisfy Tony's whims, not even if the Earth itself was destroyed. As for why he didn't ask Anna to seek help from Kay? Just looking at the three letters of the agency's name, Sherlock couldn't bear to disgust this poor organization. After all, with SHIELD above and Forbo below, K, caught on the middle, could only deeply implement the three-letter spelling. Honestly, if it weren't for loyal agents like Anna, this agency would have been wiped out long ago. "Stop wasting time, my dear Uncle Tony, tell me what you know." Sherlock tried to maintain a smile, gnashing his teeth as he responded to Tony's snarky rant. Tony clearly wasn't satisfied with Sherlock's response. The moment Sherlock finished speaking, the phone, originally placed to his ear, suddenly switched to loudspeaker mode, and Tony's voice suddenly became incredibly loud in Sherlock's ears. "Huh. Brat? I'm your uncle, so you'll have to beg me before I'll help you. But let me be frank, your approach to courting girls is woefully poor. Compared to what I used to do, it's way worse. Do you want me to teach you? Look at those love letters you wrote. Let me see, dear Anne. We've only been apart for a short while, and I've already started to," Sherlock was startled by Tony's outburst and tossed his phone onto the coffee table in front of him. Initially, Sherlock was the only one feeling a bit upset. Anna and Tony were simply watching the fun. But Tony's subsequent reading of the text messages between Sherlock and Anna was a perfect way to break on his defenses. Cough, cough, cough. Anna's flurry of coughs, thanks to the phone's location, reached Tony, and for a moment, silence fell over Sherlock, Anna, and Tony. An awkward atmosphere instantly settled between Sherlock, Anna, and Tony, the silence almost eerie. The only exception was Thor, who sat on the sofa, completely lost in thought, trying hard to suppress a smile. After a long silence, Tony finally seemed to react and spoke cautiously, tentatively. Cough, cough, cough. Sherlock, are you still there? Don't tell me that girl is right next to you right now. Hearing Tony's probing tone, Sherlock gritted his teeth, gritting his teeth and suppressing the urge to curse before slowly answering Tony's probing question. What do you think, my dear uncle? You are finished. Your dear nephew has been kidnapped and is wanted by people. Not only do you not worry about the safety of your only nephew, you even have the mind to tease your nephew. And you even talk about your glorious record in the past? I tell you, I have recorded it. I will let my dear aunt listen to the recording later to see if you still maintain your former glory. Listening to Sherlock's gritted teeth threat, Tony seemed to not take it to heart at all, and his tone was full of indifference. Worried about you? Stop kidding. Instead of worrying about you, I'd rather worry about your enemy. Given your personality, I think you'd absolutely relish this kind of fun. Worrying? What's the point? I'm just afraid you'll make a scene too big. Besides, don't you have that Asgardian-branded power bank with you? With him there, why should I worry? Cough 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 cough. Before Tony could finish his words, Thor, who had been happily enjoying his melon, couldn't help but cough. He'd been enjoying his melon like a chirping bird in a field, and in the blink of an eye, that melon had taken on my shape. With Thor's voice, the scene instantly returned to its awkward silence, even worse than before. After all, this time, even Thor, enjoying his melon, was dragged into the awkward atmosphere by Tony's verbal attack. For a moment, everyone, including Tony, fell silent, save for Sherlock, who was practically dying of laughter deep inside. It took a while for Tony to react. He didn't even try to hide his embarrassment, instead opting to run away. Ahem, let's get down to business. As Tony finished his words, the phone Sherlock had tossed on the coffee table began to rapidly transform. In a matter of moments, the seemingly ordinary device became incredibly technological. A small 3D projection appeared just above the phone. A projected Tony, only about 30 centimeters tall, appeared before the group. The only drawback was that Tony's back was facing them. Seeing this, Sherlock couldn't help but burst. Merlin's big shorts and high heels. Tony, you bastard, not only hacked my phone, you even modified it. And the most important thing is, I didn't even know. As Sherlock finished his words, everyone looked at him with strange eyes, including the projected Tony. After a while, Tony smacked his lips and sighed. Well, that's a very peculiar way of expressing emotion, but let's get down to business. After thinking for a long time, Tony decided to temporarily ignore Sherlock's unique way of expressing emotion and continue with a previous topic. Ahem, Tony, why are you talking with your back to us? Can't you turn around? Thor interrupted Tony before he could continue, and said with a silly look on his face. After hearing Thor's words, Tony immediately did a 180-degree turn, from facing the three people with his back to facing the three people, and then continued. Well, for technical reasons, Sherlock, when you have had enough fun and come back, don't forget to come to my place to update you. The technology in your phone is already several generations behind mine. Now, let's get down to business. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.